I'm pleased to open this evening's debate, and I'm pleased to call on Mr. Oliver Jones-Lyons to open the debate for the proposition. Mr. Jones-Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It'd be remiss of me not to begin by noting what an honour it is to be speaking today in what will ultimately prove to be one of those historic debates that shows why this place matters. Despite external pressure, internal pressure, political machinations, and every type of motion under the sun, this House voted clearly and decisively 2 weeks in a row to have this debate and live up to this society's name of being the last bastion of free speech. We are here tonight because that principle matters and this motion matters. I rise to propose the motion that this House believes the West is right to be suspicious of Islam. The rise of Islam in the West has been the most notable and significant demographic change in the West over the course of the last few decades. Its effects, both positive and negative, are well known. But if we are fully honest with ourselves, it is certainly not a secret that the West is in fact suspicious of Islam. Tonight, the proposition will not cower away from the issue being debated here. It is not whether the enlightened West should be suspicious of every religion. It's about Islam. The burden for side proposition will be to prove the good reason exists to find uniquely justifiable reasons to be suspicious in the religion of Islam. It is my belief those good reasons exist. It is my hope that this debate won't descend into being a series of increasingly technical, theological gotchas, nor the slinging around of anecdotes. This debate, if it is to be honest, will examine how Muslims actually live their lives in accordance with their beliefs and the teachings of their faith and its leaders. Members of the House, I will set out during my speech the incompatibility of Islam with the values of religious tolerance and pluralism that underpin our society. I will then set out how Islam is more widely irreconcilable with the fundamental principles of Western liberal democratic society. And I will end with a call to action. This discussion should not be as fraught or as, well, frankly, you can hear it, as protested as it has been. And fundamentally, the West must move back to its fundamentally liberal roots and accept that no culture, no religion, no belief may not be subject to the scrutiny of reason and virtue. But before that, Mr. Chair, it is my obligation to introduce speakers on side opposition to this honourable House. In the Union, we have a tradition of introducing the opposition speakers via roast. Given, however, it is the last week of term, and I'm feeling in a very, unlike the protesters tonight, constructive mood, I thought I'd say some thank yous. Firstly, you will hear from Aisha Khan Aziz, the Union's Chief Negotiations Officer. I'd like to thank Aisha for her work on this debate. She seems to have an extensive amount of contacts in the global Muslim community and some very entertaining anecdotes about every niche Muslim celebrity. However, the way Aisha could be more helpful to any future president she may serve is perhaps by improving her matchmaking skills, by finding them and I must emphasize, quote, snuggle buddy who won't dedicate eight weeks to jettisoning their partner's biggest debate. Next up will be Michael Doward. Michael is a podcaster from Luton. I'd like to thank Mr. Doward for being willing to speak in this debate, despite all the difficulties and pressures many speakers on this side have faced. I also hear, though, despite both supporting Luton Town, that Mr. Doward may not exactly share many other views with his fellow Hatter on the side proposition. Then you will hear from Sir Rees-Mogg, Sir Jacob. I was corrected outside. I'd like to thank Sir Jacob for being a tireless defender of both this debate and freedom of speech. My biggest concern, having heard Sir Jacob in my first debate as a fresher was that he was debating on side opposition and that he decided to go woke. But then I realized there is nothing woke about defending the right of all peoples to practice ultra-conservative values that should have been left in the 19th century. Something Sir Jacob is famously familiar with. Next up, we Abdullah al-Andalusi. Much like many of the faces on side proposition, Mr. Andalusi has been a vocal defender of the President's decision to have this debate. And I want to be absolutely clear that having the balls to defend your faith and put it up to scrutiny is something I can literally only have the utmost respect for. However, I was a bit confused when I heard that Mr. Andalusi is so popular in the Muslim community for being its answer to, and I hate to say I'm quoting Muslim committee members here, who is the Muslim Tommy Robinson? And finally, you will hear from our president, Awal Reyes. Most of my job this term has been what we have begun colloquially referring to as Alwa glazing. But I'll do it again one last time. Alwa has faced so much grief for having this important discussion, including most especially from her own community. The bravery and courage she has exhibited to stay steadfast in the face of all, from every hourly press request to every daily smear campaign to every weekly motion challenging her authority and her decisions, exemplifies exactly what this institution is about. I hate to say, she's not getting off that easy. If nothing else, if her desired career as a Green Member of Parliament fails, I'm sure after her term she'll enjoy a safe backstop in Reform UK. Mr. Chair, Madam President, these are your guests and they are most welcome. Debates about exclusivism are familiar to any student of philosophy. Islam, as many religions do, has a doctrine that is the final revelation of truth, and that all of our revelation is either not divine, not final, or simply wrong. This is unusual, but Islam presents a unique challenge to the secular liberal order. While many belief systems engage in internal moral dialogue, Islam encompasses an overarching political and legal framework, referred to as Sharia, that makes explicit, actionable demands on the governance of the state. This system includes a system of taxation called, and I'm aware I'm going to butcher this, but jizya, whereby non-Muslims are, in Muslim lands, as envisaged by the Quran, required to pay a tax for the extension of freedom of belief and the right to autonomy of life. We talk a lot about how we should be tolerant, how we should be accepting of beliefs, and I'm sure that different presentations of Islamic law will be presented. When we examine concepts like the jizya or specific jurisprudence regarding apostasy, we need not trade quotes from Scripture. We can debate the more essential tension between a political doctrine that legally categorizes citizens by their faith status and a Western liberal system that mandates equality under law regardless of belief. Take jizya. It is not fundamentally illiberal, and is it not fundamentally liberal and Western to believe in discriminatory taxes against those of different faiths that are a requirement to be guaranteed the most basic of what we in the West would call human rights, such as the right to even light up? Feel free.
It's not discriminatory taxes. It's that in an Islamic state, there's only one level of citizenship. Non-Muslims are the citizens. Muslims are the subjects of the state. We have obligations to the state that non-Muslims are not subject to. And if you go to Pakistan, for example, they have some aspects of Islamic law there. In the constitution, Muslims are not allowed to drink alcohol. But Pakistani Christians are actually allowed to drink alcohol and follow their practices. So, if anything, an Islamic state is more oppressive to Muslims than it is to non-Muslims.
So what you're saying is fundamentally that there is a discrimination there between Muslim and non-Muslims.
Not in citizenship.
This is but one example. Scholars may disagree on the interpretation of various verses of the Quran and hadiths from, again, a quote, kill the polytheists wherever you find them in Surah 9:5, to, quote, whoever changes religion, put him to death, in the words of the Prophet Muhammad in the hadiths. But with these verses, even if not literal instructions, go on.
In the surah that you mentioned, the sword of the verse, the verse of the sword, sorry, can you recite the verse that comes before it and then also the verse that comes after it? And are you willing to accept that that verse was given in a very specific time regarding a very specific tribe that burnt or prevented the treaty that they had signed with Muslims, and is not a universal command upon all Muslims?
I think I'm about to get that. But ultimately, these verses, even if not literal instructions, even if not divine law, tell you something about the fundamental difference between Islam and other faiths. Islam is a totalizing religion. Non-believers are expected to convert or render inferior, not in the divine realm above, but here on earth. Polytheists, apostates, and all of the other deserving exclusion or worse. This brings me quite nicely to my second point. Ultimately, I could list countless examples of how Muslim-majority countries treat non-believers, how it is potentially lethal in countries like Syria to be a Jew or religious minority, how Iran hangs homosexuals, how countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia subjugate women through passport controls moderated by male guardianship schemes. But it'd be the same old tired criticism. I want us to think about this differently and honestly. We can put this down to, as I'm sure side proposition will, local anomalies or distorted interpretations. Yet nearly 80% of the world's Muslim population live in states where these frameworks are not just abstract theory, but the law of the land. We must grapple with this reality. We can observe the outcome of this doctrine, where it is empowered to govern through the very same people who profess its teachings. If that practical truth is the standard of governance in the vast majority of the Muslim world, why should we, as a liberal society, treat the expansion of that system as if the outcome would be any different? Most concerningly, political Islam, once dismissed as being crazy and as fringe as the conspiracy of the Epstein files, is now being normalized as a policy end by an insurgent Green Party. The idea of Islam as a political ideology certainly isn't new, but the open pursuit of it by parliamentary hopefuls, moving from the streets to the hall of government, should concern anyone who values our secular democracy. When the stated goal of a movement is to institutionalize its legal framework, to replace existing statutes with an alternative code, we are no longer discussing a religion but a political competitor. Finally, I wouldn't leave you a point. It is my choice, as it is your choice, to be suspicious of Islam or not. But let's not act like we really treat it that way. The West has got into this unfortunate habit of thinking tolerance means protection, avoidance of scrutiny, and avoidance of uncomfortable conversations. To be clear, faith is a choice. I have faith. I'm certainly not an atheist. But I expect, and nor should anyone expect, any accommodation, nor safe space. The freedom for faith incurs the liability of criticism. If truly we shouldn't be suspicious of Islam, then why the visceral backlash that you can hear right now to this debate? Why do more Muslims not see this debate how our president does? Look at the 5 Pillars poll as an example of how the Muslim world sees this very important debate. What about how the honourable gentleman sitting right there sees it as an opportunity to defend his religion? The UK, feel free.
The initial 5 Pillars poll pointed 66% of Muslims were supportive of this debate going through.
And then they found out the speakers and they changed it. The
No,
UK...
they knew about Tommy.
They knew about Tommy, and that was one side. The UK regards, quote, religion or belief as a protected characteristic. But no belief system should be protected from inquiry. You should have the freedom to practice. I should have the freedom to criticize, to scrutinize, or in fact condemn. Religions are systems of propositions, political, philosophical, personal, and ultimately ontological. One can certainly be suspicious of Islam, and I hate to say you are allowed. It's not bigotry, it's not far right. How can a system of belief that demands the discrimination of apostates be compatible with a secular order based on equality and rights? How can a religious order that imposes subjugation as morality be compatible with a liberal democratic order? Members of the House, if you, like me, can't answer those questions, then vote for this motion. Go on.
On every measure of British values polled last year, democracy, equality before the law, loyalty to this country, opposition to bigotry, British Muslims scored higher than the British average. Will the Speaker concede that the community he is asking us to be suspicious of is holding the line on the values he claims to defend?
I would direct the President to other polls, including the polls about whether October 7th actually happened, the polls about whether 9/11 was staged by the American government, the polls about the basics of British values, democracy, freedom, and I'll leave it there because I'd already finished my speech.
I thank the honourable gentleman for opening the debate for the proposition, and I call upon Aisha Khan Aziz to open the debate for the opposition.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am a history student. I love digging up the past, though not as much as some people who have studied every terrorist attack since 9/11 and yet somehow missed the 12 centuries of Islamic history that came before. But since we are doing history, let me give you Cato the Elder, since the West likes rooting itself in its Greco-Roman traditions. Cato ended every speech in the Roman Senate on grain prices or foreign policy with the same line: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. He never argued it or proved it, he just repeated it, incessantly and relentlessly, until the Senate felt it in their bones, until Carthage felt inevitable. Eventually they went and burned it to the ground and salted the earth so nothing would grow again. We do not have to go back 2,000 years to see how this ends. We can look at simply last week in Belfast. A stabbing on a street left a man fighting for his life at the hands of a Sudanese refugee here on a legal residence permit. Within 48 hours, mobs were going from door to door looking for them. 27 people were made homeless overnight. A Ukrainian family burned out. Muslim parents who were asking their white neighbors to keep their children safe while they stayed in their houses and waited for the inferno to come. A 2-month-old baby was pulled from a burning house by firefighters. Northern Ireland's Justice Minister said it plainly. Bad faith actors who could not have found Belfast on a map a week earlier were deliberately stoking people onto the streets, and that is the absolute definition of racism. But before I make that case in full, let me acknowledge the distinguished bench in front of me tonight. Oliver JL, I begin with you. You dropped out of your GDL course to spend more time unemployed at the Oxford Union. And given how many times a Muslim candidate has stood between you and the position you actually wanted here in the Union, perhaps tonight's motion perhaps tonight's motion is less about the West's relationship with Islam and more about yours. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, known to his hooligans as Tommy Robinson. Stephen, there is a crowd outside rioting against you tonight, and without the protection and generosity of a Muslim Palestinian president and a mostly South Asian executive committee, you would be quite literally cooked. Then Lawrence Fox, actor, politician, however, I think his most memorable role might be the ex-husband of Doctor Who's Rose Tyler. Founder of the Reclaim Party, which at the last general election reclaimed approximately 0.02% of the British vote. Also a former GB News presenter, former because GB News let him go, which if you know anything about GB News, says something quite specific about the threshold. Finally, Jonathan Sacradotti, a core memory of my Michaelmas 2024 Oxford Union experience. However, you wrote an article in The Spectator merely 2 days ago. There you insist sharing a panel with Stephen Yaxley Lennon is not a reflection on you, and that guilt by association is beneath serious argument, only to spend the rest of the piece asking Muslims to wear the guilt of a minority who share nothing with them but a faith. You cannot demand that logic for yourself, Jonathan, and deny it to everyone else in the room.
Point of information. My argument was with the ideology of Islam, not with individual Muslims.
I read the article and it was a bit very self-apologetic about speaking here tonight. Mr. Chair, these are Madam Speaker's guests, and in the spirit of free speech, they are most welcome. The proposition's argument is seductive. It says, look at the threat, look at the attacks. Suspicion is just and prudence. I do not need to deny that Islamist terrorism or an Islamist threat is real. I need to show you that collective suspicion of Islam is irrational, counterproductive, and morally catastrophic. So let us be inductive. Let us look at what that suspicion actually produces. After 9/11, the West treated Islam as a civilizational enemy and called that suspicion prudence. The result was not safety. It was Abu Ghraib, it was Guantanamo Bay, men who were held for decades without charge, men like Ahmed Rabbani, a taxi driver from Karachi, sold to the Americans for $5,000 because they thought he was someone else. 20 years in a cage and he never once was charged. His son Jawad grew up on a 15-minute phone call a year, a father who would only say he is in jail. At 13, Jawad went on the dark web to watch his father's torture videos. For years, he believed his father must have deserved it because, in his words, you don't torture anyone for no reason. He did not meet his father until 2023. A grown man meeting a stranger at an airport because suspicion took his father before he was even born. That is what suspicion produces. Not security, but the very monster it claims to defend against, and a childhood stolen from a boy who committed no crime either. When it is not states, but ordinary people who act on it, the ledger is just as damning. 2 genocides of Muslims in 30 years, Bosnia in 1995, Myanmar in 2017, a pogrom in Delhi in 2020, all fed by the same elemental claim that the proposition is making tonight, that Muslims are foreign, violent, a threat by nature rather than by individual acts. The motion, at its core, is Samuel Huntington's argument, which is the clash of civilizations, Islam and the West, placed as mortal enemies in a struggle that only one side can win. Published in 1993, it has shaped Western policy for 30 years. So let us test it against the evidence. The evidence, they say, is ISIS, Palmyra, the Bamia Buddhas. Look, here is the clash. Here is why suspicion is rational. All they do is destroy. So let me take them to Jerusalem. In the Al-Aqsa complex, which is the third holiest site in Islam, there are Gothic rose windows. Crusader stonework preserved by Muslim custodians for 8 centuries. Salahuddin Ayyubi took Jerusalem in 1187 and left the Christian stonework standing. That is not a clash of civilizations.
And what did Erdogan do to Hagia Sophia?
I'm talking about Jerusalem. The evidence... and denied. Bamia, when the Taliban first proposed destroying the Buddhas, scholars from Al-Azhar University in Cairo flew to Kandahar to argue against it on theological grounds. Hazara Muslims took up arms to protect them. That tradition tried harder to save those statues than the West ever did. Which brings me to Palmyra. The man who died trying to save it was an 81-year-old Muslim man, tortured for a month and beheaded for refusing to talk. So who is Islamist violence actually killing? Not the West, it's Muslims. 91% of everyone killed by Islamist terrorism is Muslim. The Taliban has killed 69,000 people, ISIS 58,000, Boko Haram 25,000 people. All of them nearly Muslim, killed by men who called themselves the only true Muslims on earth. For 20 years, the West has pointed at the body count and blamed the corpses for suspicion. Huntington told governments that they were not engaged, they were in a civilizational war. They believed him, and in fighting that war, they generated precisely the enemy his thesis required. Yes?
Are you suggesting that Islamic death meted out to other Muslims should not make people in the West suspicious because they care about Islam killing its own people?
I think primarily the West's argument towards criticism of Muslim is to do with themselves, as opposed to how they treat other Muslims. I don't think that the footing in which we treat other Muslims versus Westerners is equal. That is the paradox of the modern culture war, actually. Offended by everything, shamed by nothing. They take issue with a woman on a headscarf on a bus and feel no shame about the wars we exported or the terrorist regimes we bankrolled. The sensibility that finds Islam offensive cannot locate its own reflection in history. And trust me, the West has plenty of history to locate. The Inquisition, colonialism, slavery, the internment of Japanese Americans, McCarthyism. Every generation has had its Carthage, a group cast as a civilizational threat. Every generation told itself it was being reasonable, and every generation was wrong. So let us be clear about Western values. The West does not have a settled, unified set of values against which Islam can be measured and found wanting. It is a contested, unresolved project, and so is Islam, and so is every intellectual tradition. The question is not whether one perfect civilization can judge another and find it deficient, denied, but whether two imperfect, contested traditions can coexist, and that is not answered by one of them claiming the right to treat the other as inherently suspect. I agree that Western values are worth defending, so completely that I will show you what they look like when I actually live them. Western critical thinking means I can read a scholar's commentary on a Quranic verse and decide that he might be right or wrong. It means I can hold up my faith to scrutiny without it shattering, because a faith that cannot survive a question probably deserves to be questioned, am I right? But the proposition's argument is not critical thinking should be universal. It is that the West has a right to be suspicious of me. Before I even open my mouth, before I demonstrate anything at all, suspicious of who I am and also what I eat, ironically. MI5's own researchers have said this themselves. When communities feel pre-convicted, they disengage from the institutions that could intercept real threats. I'm trying to get through my speech. Legitimized suspicion does not make us safer. It makes the people we need on side feel like enemies. One more thing about Western values. The proposition speaks of a Judeo-Christian tradition under threat from Islam. That phrase was coined in the 1930s in America to fight fascism, built against exclusion. Then the Cold War came, and it was repurposed as a banner against godless communism, because nothing says rugged Western freedom quite like reminding the Soviets to go to church. Now it has changed target again. No longer Jewish people are written out of the West, but the Muslim person. It is the same machinery, the same sentence structure, the same act of drawing a line around who counts as one of us, just pointed at different people. Islamophobia has become one of the last socially acceptable forms of bigotry in British public life, and the proposition wants to give that bigotry a mandate. My grandfather came to this country in the 1950s. He did not arrive suspicious. He arrived with a particular stubborn hope of someone who believed Britain meant what it had said. He spent his life proving he belonged here, brick by brick, year by year. He even gave up his name, Abdul Aziz, for one that would open more doors. We gave this country our blood to enrich it. That proposition is asking you to tell him that was never going to be enough. Staging suspicion of Islam is not intellectual rigor. It is the same Islamophobia that keeps people like Stephen Yaxley Lennon and Lawrence Fox trafficking. And it is a disgrace. I'm about to finish my speech. It is a disgrace that Muslims should have to keep performing their humanity to earn belief. I say that is not Western values. That is Western failure. That is a Western disgrace, and this House is better than that. I urge you all to vote against the motion tonight. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Lady for opening the case for the opposition, and I now call upon Mr. Tommy Robinson to advance the case for the proposition.
First of all, I'd like to say I'd much rather be watching the England game than in here tonight. I've simply come here because of the commitment to free speech that Arwa had for this event. I know you have totally opposite views to me, but I know that people may step into the field of inviting me somewhere without realising what it's going to face. So I'm fully aware of the backlash you would have faced, but I congratulate you on your defence of free speech, and that's the reason why I've come tonight. Yeah. I'd also like to congratulate Aisha on her first great speech, and I'm sorry that your family aren't here today to have watched that, but it wasn't my supporters that have attacked them outside. It's not my supporters who are causing a rabble or smashing the place up and attacking police officers. It's not supporters on our side of the debate either. It's supporters on your side of the debate who are out there causing mayhem. Yeah? So before talking about Islam, I'd love to believe what Jacob and the others on this panel believe, that we shouldn't be suspicious of Islam. Jacob, there's 480 Muslims who live in your constituency. 0.5%. you probably can't find a Muslim. There's 3 mosques, the main one being in Bath University. I'm from Luton Town. We have 80,000 Muslims, 45 mosques, 33% of the population. So I asked myself, why would a non-Muslim be telling any of us that we shouldn't be suspicious of Islam? Well, of course, Jacob does not have to live with the consequences of his own disastrous government of the Conservative Party and their policies, beliefs only the elite can afford to hold. So to Islam, first, should we, the West, be suspicious of it? I want to be clear what Islam is, because it's not what any of you say it is. It's not what I say it is. It's not what we wish it to be. And it's not what your friendly local imam or your taxi driver or Mr. Andalusia decides it is. Islam is defined in the Quran. Muslims that believe the Quran to be the word of Allah, written in an eternal book in heaven and revealed to Muhammad in the 7th century. And it's the Sunnah, the excellent pattern of behaviour or exalted standard of moral excellence as defined in the Hadiths, which record his sayings, actions and silent approvals or disapprovals of Muhammad, and in the biography. And the whole idea, by the way, is based on accepting that Muhammad is the final prophet, because the Quran says so, and the Quran is the word of God, because Muhammad says so. So, seeking common ground. I'm not here for a fight, contrary to what everyone believes. Everyone thinks everywhere I go I want to fight. I want to find some common ground. Finding common ground with Islam. Muhammad said to the Christians of Najran, come to a word that is just between us and you, that we worship none but Allah, and that we associated no partners with him. So Islam presents itself as a religion that wants to seek common ground with others. Come to a word, Muhammad was saying, let's find some common ground. Nothing to be suspicious of there, right? But it's the no partners. That's the key. Islam says it wants common ground, but the common ground must be Islam. Christians must deny Jesus is the Son of God, a partner. But anyway, let's look for some common ground. Okay, that's what we want to find. I've seen how this works, Andrew, so I'll take as many questions as you want at the end. I'm just going to finish my speech. How many of you in here are gay? You don't actually need to put your hands up, okay? In the Quran, through the story of Lot, homosexuality is condemned, and 4 of the 5 major schools of Islamic law think it should be punishable by death. Maybe I'm going to finish my speech. In fact, 24 countries where Islam is the state religion have criminal penalties for homosexuality. 8 of them is punishable by death. So I wonder, maybe if you're gay, you might maybe be a little bit suspicious of this. That's in Afghanistan, Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Yemen. They kill you for being gay. Who's protesting about this? When these countries, state legislators or governments visit our country, who protests? Awa, I'd just love to finish it.
Point of order has been raised. President.
As per discussions with previous speakers, we did agree that we would take points of information from fellow speaker, guests, and audience members. If you can respect that as part of a constructive debate, that would be very much appreciated.
Thank the President for that point of order. Mr. Robinson, I think the idea that the President's putting across is...
Hear the question first.
Take a question every now and then. Take a question every now and then, please. Thank you.
Can we at least agree killing people because they are homosexuals is never okay? It was never okay then, and it's not okay now. Now, I'll have to listen, won't I? I'll see how this works.
Where does it say in the Quran or the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad that someone who is homosexual or gay should be executed?
You don't need to convince me, mate. You need to convince the 8 Islamic countries that are killing them, the people who are being thrown off rooftops. Go have your argument with Hamas, go have your argument with ISIS. You don't need to convince me. Now, please, if I can just finish. Again, let's talk about sex, okay? How many of you have had sex since you got here? I want to see your hands up. I knew that was coming, right? You see, the Quran prescribes 100 lashes for the male and the female involved in what Islam considers illegal sexual intercourse. That's the Quran 24:2. But Islamic scholars have gone all in on this issue, yeah? Not just lashing, all schools of Islamic law prescribe death by stoning if a person is married. And the Shia school, Jafari, prescribes 100 lashes before you're stoned to death. So maybe, if you think no one believes in this, barbaric stuff, in 2023, the head imam of the Green Lane Mosque, the head imam, you can watch this video, actually gives a seminar to his congregation on how we keep the modesty of the woman before we smash rocks at her head. So you see, she has to be buried up to a certain level to preserve her modesty.
Point of information. Is what you are discussing not abuse of Islamic scripture, not actually what is discussed in the Islamic scripture? Give me examples from Islamic scripture in Islamic law, not cherry-picked examples that have been taken out of context. Give me examples from the verses of the Quran that back up your arguments.
Should the lady... The simple question is, should the gay person who was thrown off the rooftop have been suspicious? Should the lady buried into the ground having rocks smashed at her head, which is the law which I'll get to...
Does it matter what the Quran says when Muslims do not practice it? Does it matter when the Muslims who are professing exactly what you just said are the ones who are saying it?
Yep. Now, 25 countries where Islam is the state religion have criminal penalties for sex outside of marriage. 9 of them is punishable by death. So again, no one needs to have this argument with me. You don't need to convince me, okay? You don't need to convince me. Again, who's protesting about this? Can we at least agree as a room? Can we look for some common ground with the Muslim community? Stoning people for having sex outside of marriage is never okay. It was never okay. It's not okay then, and it's not okay now.
Since Jewish law says the same thing...
I'm not here to talk about Jewish law.
Should we be suspicious of Jewish law equally? Will you be consistent, sir?
That's not the question we're here for. If you want to have that question debate, have it. Yeah? Can we at least agree with the Muslim community, okay? In modern Britain, where you're preaching to what now, 4 million Muslims, we can just put a line through the verses in the Quran, yeah? The parts of Islam's sacred text that says these things are not okay, they're not practiced now, they weren't okay then, and they're not okay now. Can we meet in the middle somewhere and have you accept the verses in the Quran today?
Will you demand that Orthodox Jews put lines through the Tanakh? Would you agree that Orthodox Jews put line through the Tanakh as you are requesting Muslims to do?
I think you're confused at which debate you're at, okay? And the motion of this debate. Now, let's turn to good old Muhammad, okay? According to Islam's sacred text, an exalted example of moral excellence. Well, in 2014, ISIS, again, because this is important, because they're following scripture, ISIS, when they captured Yazid...
Sorry? Ask any Muslim whether they believe ISIS is following Islamic scripture, and you will find that no Muslim agrees that they are actually Islamic.
Once again.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm sorry, Madam President.
Can I just finish
think the
my
point
speech?
has been made. You must allow the speaker to continue.
In 2014, ISIS captured Yazidi men and boys. And what they'd done is they pulled their pants down. They surrendered. They pulled their pants down. Anyone who had any pubic hair was shot in the head, and some of them had their heads cut off with knives. You can watch the videos if you want online, yeah? Okay? They were following the example of Muhammad, who, according to Islam's own sacred text, presided over the execution of up to 900 men and boys, which was the Jewish tribe who had surrendered, and any male prisoner who had pubic hair was executed. That is what the practice that the Muslims in 2014 were following. This is why scripture is important and then why we must be suspicious. Now, consider the fact, I'll just finish please, consider the fact that there are no Jews, none, in any of the 26 countries where Islam is a state religion. Countries which once held thriving Jewish communities. This is not an accident, and there are precious few Christians in any of these Islamic countries either, that once had majority Christian populations. You see, one way or another, these countries are following the example of Muhammad. I will certainly expel the Jews and Christians, excuse me, can I just finish? I will certainly expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula and will not leave any but Muslim. That's a quote of Muhammad, Sahih Muslim. Sahih being the authentic, considered most authentic hadith. Please, can I just finish?
Wonderful. Thank you. On the point.
Sorry. Do you not have to accept? No, it doesn't. Can I carry on? Okay. So, of course, put your hands up if you think it's okay for a man older than most of your dads, say in their 50s, to marry someone in infant school, let's say 6 years old, and consummate that marriage, rape, when the little girl reaches 9. By the way, that's year 5 doing key stage 2. Doing key stage 2. No, please, because I know many of you gentlemen should have your hands up at this point, no? We're going to get onto it, but you agree that Muhammad was perfect. As we know, he married a 6-year-old, had sex with her when she was 9. We've previously had this discussion, Andalusia. Do you think children should be suspicious of Islam who are studying key stage 2? Now, please, can I just finish? And of course, can I please finish?
Order.
Please let me finish. Yeah? You can get on.
The speaker declined. Please allow the speaker to continue.
And I must mention Quran 65:4, where God, debatable, God spells out the rules for divorcing prepubescent children. Okay? So let me read it. And for those who have no courses, not yet started your periods, who are still immature, their iddah, their waiting period, is 3 months. What has happened for a child to be married, and this is the Quran telling you what the rules are and obligations to divorce a child before they've started puberty. Yeah? Can we be suspicious on this question? Is this... No, please, can I finish then? And to be honest, I'm just here. I'm the extremist, apparently. Yeah? I'm the extremist for not wanting homosexuals thrown off rooftops, not wanting women buried in the ground, and not wanting children studying Key Stage 2 to be married and raped. So, of the 10 countries with the highest rates of child marriage, 7 of them are Islamic countries. There's no minimum age in Sudan, Somalia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, because there's no minimum age in Islam. But whatever the stated legal age for marriage is in some Muslim countries, forced marriage of young girls, often to much older men, is prevalent in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Yemen. I could go on and on. UNICEF data shows, for all of you ladies who care about women and children's rights, UNICEF data shows child brides are unlikely to finish education, more likely to believe wife beating is justified, and more likely to have experienced intimate part of violence. I'd just like to finish, please guys, I apologise. Can we at least agree, executing prisoners of war, including young boys, carrying out ethnic cleansing of Jews and Christians from the lands, or marrying and having sex with a little child when Muhammad was 53 years old, can we at least agree today? Muhammad was not and is not the perfect example for mankind, nor is he an exalted example of moral excellence. Quite the opposite, in fact. Because if we can't agree this, then the West is right to be suspicious of Islam, because of what the sacred text says, because of how millions of Muslims interpret the sacred text, because of how Muhammad's life is held up as the perfect example, not back then, but now, for all Muslims to follow. That's the problem. They don't recognise any of the problems and see anything wrong which Muhammad done. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you care about gay rights, if you care about women's rights, if you care about children's rights, if you care about human rights, or if you care about free speech, I urge you to support this motion.
I thank the honourable gentleman for advancing the case for the proposition, and I call upon Mr McAdowd to continue the case for the opposition.
Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to start by thanking Oxford Union for inviting me to speak here. I am truly honoured and very grateful to be here. I never thought I'd be here. To be honest, I've met a new friend of me, Jacob Rees-Mogg. So, you know, this is, I've had a nice meal, some halal chicken, which I'm sure Tommy enjoyed. So I'm just thanking the, and Liam, of course, likes a bit of halal chicken now. So I know you do, mate. So I'll just take this opportunity to thank you guys. So the real question, I believe the first question was, is should the West be suspicious of Islam? Was that the question of the debate? You're nodding your head, so it must be. Right, so Tommy, you've been... Wait, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm going to answer that. Tommy's been saying the same thing for 15 years and still has to read it.
Proven right.
Right,
Proven
yeah,
right.
no, because you still have to read it, so obviously you don't know your case that well. So,
Point of order.
should the West
Point of
be...
order. Proven right.
Yeah, right, gosh, well, mate. So, should the West be suspicious...
Point of order, do you allow people to cut in without permission from the speaker?
I think we ask that speeches be heard
Right.
in some courtesy, gentlemen. If the point of information is declined, then please simply allow the speaker to continue.
I don't mind taking questions.
Well, then, it is for the speaker to choose whether a point of information is accepted.
Sure.
With that, Mr. Dowd, please continue.
I haven't even started yet. Give me a minute. Right. So, should the West be suspicious of Islam? Well, the truth of that is it's going to depend. Okay? It's going to depend if you're invested in pornography, if you're invested in alcohol, if you're invested in interest banking, if you're invested in drink, drugs, criminality, then probably you should be suspicious of Islam, because Islam has come as an alternative way of life to that. Islam, what is it?
Could we add Judaism to that list?
Sure. Okay? And you can't become a Jew. So not very easily. So Islam has come as a option, an alternative to those vices in this world. Okay, the real question should be, should the West be suspicious of Muslims practicing Islam in the West? That's the question. And why? Why would you be? Because Tommy says so. Because Tommy said that you should be suspicious of this religion and suspicious of practicing or, I don't know, extreme Muslims, okay? So let's talk a little bit about Tommy's credibility. Because Tommy has spent the last 15 years of building his credibility upon being a white man from Luton. And he's been... Go on.
This debate is not about Tommy Robinson.
I'm getting to it. All right, sit down.
The gentleman's made his point. Please take your seat.
Sit down. And are you in it as well? Are you in it as well?
The speaker will be heard.
Are you in it as well? I don't mind taking out the lot of you, mate. I don't mind. It's not a problem. Listen, so the credibility, it's important to basis the credibility, okay, in the debate, of course. It's important to debate.
Gentlemen, please take your seats. Both of you gentlemen,
He just said he doesn't mind taking us out. So we have a Muslim
seats.
again.
Yeah, in the debate, of course.
Mr.
In the debate, of course.
Can I ask you just to take your seats? Mr. Dowd, can I ask you to just stop speaking for 1 second? Speakers will be heard with courtesy. If a point of information is offered and it is in decline, can I please ask that you allow the speaker to continue? Equally, may I say to the speaker, it is expected that points of information will be taken during your speech.
I've took about 4 or 5 so
I understand that, sir. And with that, I will ask the speaker to continue.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, can I please ask no interjections other than points of information?
Point of order, Chair,
Point of orders.
which you briefed us must be taken. A threat to take out people on the other side is unacceptable.
Totally.
And should be dealt with by the team.
Mr. Dowd, have you made such a threat? And if so, I must ask you to withdraw it.
It was a threat within the debate, to take them within the debate, because we're in a debating forum.
Mr. Dowd, can I ask you in that case to moderate your language
I'll tell you what, I will retract that statement.
and avoid the
I
misunderstanding?
will retract what I said, if that's a doable thing. Right, so let me get on. He's built his credibility from coming from Luton and telling people that Luton is now a Muslim-run town. Predominantly, it has 40-something mosques. It has some extremist mosques, some extremist this and that, Sharia-run courts. But I'm also from Luton, you know, and I've also been in Luton for 56 years. I was born there, and I'm still there. I'm still living on the manor. As far as I know, Tommy hasn't lived there for at least 10 years. I believe now he lives in Spain, like most good patriots do. They move on to Spain. So let's talk a little bit about Tommy's time in Luton, because I'm not going to do any more with you, right? So talking about his little bit of time that he had in Luton, it's well documented that Tommy was in the Luton firm called The Mix.
Point of information. This debate is not about Tommy Robinson, what he does in his free time, what he thinks about anything.
Right.
It's about whether the West should be suspicious of Islam.
And he's the one telling the West to be suspicious of Islam. So it's important that I take his credibility about how to say that. Okay, the arguments that he had in Luton while he was in the MIGs, which was the Luton Town Football Firm, gang, whatever it is, most towns and cities have them, okay? That's what his time. There was other gangs in Luton. Wasn't the only one. No, there was other gangs in Luton. One of them was called the Gambinos. One of them was called the Yellows. I know these are ridiculous names, but we are talking ridiculous people in these gangs at the time. Let me finish, please, okay? So I've taken a few points of information. You just seem to do it now just to stifle, because, no, I'm not taking any from you, okay? Okay?
Mr. Robinson,
problems
please,
that these gangs had, as Tommy would say, was either religious and or racial between Pakistanis and his football guys, was really not racial. It wasn't racial, it wasn't religious. It was normally, like most gangs, supply and demand of product. Okay? That's what it comes down to. Tommy would also say that there was an extremist group in Luton. No, there was an extremist group in Luton called Al Marjaroon. I agree with him. It was an extremist group. And I made my opposition to this group vocal at that time when they was there. You know, but even a broken clock can be right twice a day. This group was tiny. It was 8 strong at most, with maybe 8 hangers-ons, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They were barred from every mosque I knew. I don't know all of the mosques, but they were barred from every mosque that I knew. Most of the shops in the town, the Muslim shops, they didn't want to let them in either. But the amplification of their message was done by the media. The media would go to the predominantly Muslim populated area in Luton called Berry Park. They'd walk down there with a camera, they'd stick it in front of these guys, and they would be straight in front of it. It was amplified deliberately to cause friction between communities. That small extremist group doesn't exist anymore. I believe they've been disbanded, and they don't even hang around with each other anymore. I could tell you, yes. Okay.
If you consume foods
consume drugs, and if you lend money for interest, you should be suspicious of Islam.
No, I said if you invested in...
Why should we?
Because Islam has come as an alternate choice to that. Islam has come as an alternate way of life to that. I think I explained it when I mentioned it the first time. There's a lot more that I want to tell you. Time does not permit me to speak here for an hour. So obviously I can't go into detail about everything. I know in detail about this group of Al-Majroon because I was one of the trusted go-betweens from mosques in Luton that was trying to get them to stop talking. As he says, a lot of the time there's not enough calling out of Muslims in the public. But it does happen. There was 500 mosques that wrote an email condemning the grooming gangs, but it never really got out there. And they all done that, okay? They done that years ago. I think it's 2013. Anyway, these mosques in Luton was a go-between between the Al-Majroon group and the mosque was me, because I was a trusted go-between. Even though I was anti this group, they still trusted me to go between them. And I know that most of Luton didn't want them there. It wasn't the case. Okay, like I said, I would love to say more. There's a lot more beans that I could spill, to be quite honest with you. So let me give you a version of Luton that I recognise. Tommy has a version of Luton that he recognises. Tommy has a version of Luton that he recognises. Let me give you a couple of points of the Luton that I recognise, okay? And I'll firstly go back to the first lockdown in COVID, where everyone was social distancing and taking it seriously and everything else. There was a Muslim charity in Luton, and it's still there actually. There was a Muslim charity in Luton. I was volunteering for them because I was off work for a few weeks, okay, due to the building sites shutting down. We were handing out food packs. Muslims were coming and handing in food and or giving us money to buy food from supermarkets and whatever. I'm going to say 99%, but it's more realistically 100%. But I'll say 99%. The food packs that I personally handed out were to white old age pensioners that lived in old age pensioner homes or care homes. I never once handed it out to a Muslim family, a Polish family, or any other, but it was purely white old age pensioners.
Information. Can I just ask, what was charity? What charity?
A crisis aid. Okay, and it's still there. It's in Sundon Park, okay? Right, so it's still there, the charity, okay? So we was handing out these things. I remember one 90-year-old man, he had to buzz me into his care home, and I put the bags outside and had to step up the hallway because there was social distancing. He come out buckled in half. I tried to speak to him. He told me, I've got cancer, I'm 93 years old, and I'm going to die soon. And none of my family speak to me. None of my family help me. This is the Islam in Luton that I recognise. Let me give you another one. I was in Farley Hill, not opposite the Parrot pub that Tommy would have remembered, okay? There was a care home. I was working there for BTS, the council. What?
I do understand that the speaker was confused about the motion at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not confused. I'm not confused. I'm talking about Islam. If you remember, I've said Islam quite a lot in my talk, okay? Don't stand up for a point because I'm done with you now, yeah? So listen, I was working at this care home. And a taxi come pulling in, okay? I noticed that one of the women was in the passenger seat. She clearly was distressed. This big, fat Pakistani brother with a big black beard jumped out, opened the car door. She'd fallen over in the street. He'd picked her up, put her in the car, and he'd brought her back to the care home. He was literally in tears. He wanted my number. He wanted to go to the hospital. Why are you suspicious of these people? Who are these people to be suspicious of? Who are these people to be suspicious of, okay? Tommy is desperate to make connections between crime and Islam, especially when it comes to SA crimes. He's desperate to make this connection between the crime and Islam, even though nobody that commits these crimes says that they did it because of Islam. But when it comes to Muslims that do good things, NHS workers, doctors, nurses, charity care sector workers, which Islam is overrepresented in those areas. Never does he want to make the connection between Muslims doing good deeds and Islam. It's only, no, I told you already. Never does he make the connection between Muslims doing good deeds and Islam. In fact, actually, when you ask these doctors, nurses, care workers, charity sector workers, why do you do it? They'll say, because my religion tells me to be a good person. My religion tells me to be in service of the people. He doesn't want to hear that. He just wants to paint this picture. You cannot serve two masters. You can only be loyal to one master. And I'll tell you now, without any hesitation, my master is Allah. La ilaha illallah. There is no God worthy of worship except Allah. Okay? But my God tells me how to serve you. My God tells me how to serve you. Okay? So I can be in service. I don't care if you're Muslim, non-Muslim, black, white, fat, thin, short, tall. I don't care. I will serve you because my religion and my master, Allah, tells me how to be in service to my community. No. I will give you many.
Mr. Jones-Lyons, thank you.
I've done more than two. Right. I will give you multiple examples. I will give you multiple examples of Muslims, people that have changed their lives and become better fathers, better husbands, better community members, better people in society, better daughters, better wives, better people in society because they've accepted Islam. Some of them are sitting in this room today. Maybe I could put myself in that category as well. Why are you suspicious? Why are you suspicious of these people? What Islam has only ever brought good to them and made them better citizens. Why would you be suspicious? And of course, yes, you can yawn. You know, this is what you do. It's not a problem. I'm not here for you. Yeah, and it's past mine too. Okay. Of course I want to spread Islam. Who would I be if I had the truth and didn't want to share it with you people? Who would I be if I knew that Islam, or believed at least that Islam was the truth, and I didn't want to share it with you people because I thought it was the best thing? If I had a big plate of food and you was hungry and it cost me nothing to give you food, it cost me nothing to give you food, why would I not give you food? Why? I don't want to do any more points of call. You was devoided them at your time.
UN fatwa that prohibits Muslims giving
Gentlemen.
Sorry?
Please let us...
Fatwa that prohibits Muslims giving charity to non-Muslims.
No, there isn't. No, there isn't.
Gentlemen, please. Thank
no,
you.
there isn't.
Please.
There
Please
isn't.
allow Mr.
Okay?
McDowell to finish. He's declined the point of information.
That's enough. That's enough. I've said that's enough.
The speakers on this side have been egregious in attacking the
Yes, it's been a constant. It's okay.
Can the chair please take some action?
Bruv, thank you. I work better under pressure. I work better under pressure.
If I can ask you to stop for 1 second. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for that point of order. I think on both sides there have been unwarranted interjections.
Yeah.
A point of order, if declined, please take your seat again. Do not continue to interject. I will say to the Honourable Gentleman, I have seen that from both sides this evening. It is not, as he puts it, on one side only. On both sides. If a point of information is declined, please take your seat again. Mr. Dowd, please continue.
Okay, so why would I not want to spread Islam? Why would I wish that I could take my heart and give it to you people for a minute so you could taste the sweetness of Iman, and then you would never be suspicious of Muslims again. There is not a single head on anyone's hair, apart from Tufts, that I would touch unjustly, and that's inside and outside of this hall. I mean no harm to anybody. I will defend myself if I have to, but no Muslim that I know thinks like that either. Why wouldn't I want to share that? Where is the problem with that? My friend here, my colleague, is going to deal with the age of Aisha. I dealt with it for 10 or 11 minutes on Liam's podcast, so I don't think that I need to go into that again. My friend will deal with that. Okay. You mentioned the verse in the Quran about prepubescent women being married. It's not true. Okay, if you knew what you were talking about, you wouldn't have said it. The word that's used for the female in the Quran is a word that's used for women. That ayah of the Quran was revealed because a man come to ask the Prophet, how do I divorce my wife if she does not have periods because she is past the age of period? She's a mature woman. That's what that was for. Then the verse was revealed. No, that's what it is. You're not an expert on the Quran. You're not an expert on Islam. You present yourself to be an expert to people that don't know any better, but you're not talking to those people today. No more points of information. No more points of information. We talk about, I'll be 1 second, yeah, 1 minute. We talk about reform. They talk about want to reform Islam. How dare he? How dare they and how dare he say a man that is ignorant within the religion of Islam talk about reforming of Islam, okay? People that come to talk here are people of intelligence, people of professorships, people that are intellects in their field. This man is not an intellect in the field or an authority in the field of Islam, and his presence about talking about Islam is a disservice to this place.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for that speech advancing the opposition. I call upon Mr. Lawrence Fox to continue the case for the proposition.
Do I need to raise this up, or is it suitably heightened for the Luton community? Before Neville Chamberlain flew to Germany to appease Adolf Hitler, he said, European peace is what I'm aiming at, and I hope this journey may open the way to get it. And here we are, 87 years later, and European peace and peace in the West is being threatened again. Upon his return from Germany with his piece of paper, Chamberlain said, we are resolved that the method of consultation shall be the method adopted to deal with any other questions that may concern our two countries. And 338 days later, Britain was at war with Germany. So this morning I was thinking about this debate and the worthiness of consultation. which Chamberlain invoked. And the motion, this House believes the West is right to be suspicious of Islam. And then I started thinking about a cartoon that I have here in this envelope. It's a cartoon which I think it instills in me feelings much, much more worrying than suspicion. But, you know, in the spirit of consultation, I'll just leave it here for the moment, if we're okay with that. So, first let us start with the word suspicion. There was a minority, going back to Chamberlain and that brilliant foreign policy, there was a minority who were gravely suspicious of fascism leading up to the Second World War and were very vocal in that suspicion, who thought that Chamberlain's appeasement policy was just wrong. That far from being the peace in our time he promised, our appeasement would only serve to embolden Hitler. One of those who faced the most criticism for his prescience, suspicious prescience perhaps, was Winston Churchill. He saw fascism for what it was, an existential threat to the West. No one needs a history lesson from me, but it is possibly worth noting now, especially here, and thanks to our lovely friends outside, that it is perfectly acceptable and actively encouraged in every school, university, TV channel and media organisation across the West to be suspicious of fascism. In fact, if we listen to our friends outside, that's not enough. You've got to be an anti-fascist. You've got to take direct action against fascism. Chamberlain today just seems like a moronic simpleton to me. So perhaps the deaths of millions of people could have been avoided if only Churchill's suspicion had been heeded, that his perspective acknowledged, but he stood alone whilst the train continued to hurtle towards us because we didn't want to upset anybody. It is an entirely natural and positive human instinct to be suspicious of many things. From teaching our children not to get in cars with strangers, to friends checking in on each other when one is going on a date with a new person for the first time, suspicion is healthy. It sparks in every single sinew of our being. It is the product of generational caution in pursuit of survival. It's central to our very fundamentalist of instincts. It isn't prejudice, it's prudence. Suspicion isn't hatred either. It's pattern recognition. And I would like to make it clear at this point, Awa, I would like to thank you so much for inviting us to have this debate. And I know you've struggled so much with people trying to cancel you. And I know exactly what that feels like. So thank you so much. I think I would like to make it very clear that I am not here to express suspicions of individual Muslims at all. There are many Muslims, including within my own family, who I love deeply. And as a Christian, I'm commanded to love my neighbour and to pray for my enemy. It is my most strongly held belief on this planet that every single human life is sacred and all lives matter. But I am absolutely not, and I will not, be commanded to love or submit to ideas or ideologies. As was mentioned earlier, as Jesus said, render to Caesar what is Caesar. Within one directive, he created the separation between church and state, which in Islam does not exist, which literally, Islam literally means submission. So there is no church, there is no state, there is only Islam. My suspicion of Islam, therefore, is strongly, and I think reasonably, held. Islam is a comprehensive social, political and military doctrine which leaves no part of its followers' lives untouched. As Andrew Hussey, the British historian, says, Islam more closely resembles a ruthlessly efficient war machine than a religion. Islam is borderless, expansionary and interested only in submission to Allah. And for us, for some of us, unfortunate non-believers, we're given three choices.
Point of information. When was the last time there was a jihad declared against a foreign government and the expansion of Muslim lands into non-Muslim lands? When was the last time?
What's that got to do with what I'm talking about?
Well, you said that it's a military war machine. It's been around for quite a long time.
A point of order has been raised.
When people are giving points of information, you need to be very audible so the microphone picks up.
I thank the ex-president for his... I'm not sure that's a point of order. I'm
also,
take his seat again.
as people may or may not have noticed, I'm not an Islamic scholar, and I'm not into giving you a history lesson about the Quran. But I will give you a history lesson into the bits of the Quran that I understand and the bits of Islam I understand through those that I love and from my readings. So Islam gives you three options, as far as I can tell, as a Westerner. Submit. Pay the jizya, the tax, which institutionalizes inferior status for non-Muslims in Islamic states. Or, excuse me, 3, war with Muslims. Right. Notably, within those three options that Islam offers you, there is not one option which says, let's live in peaceful coexistence as equals in a pluralistic society. Not once. Not once does it say that.
I'm certain you are aware that there is an entire chapter in the Quran, a chapter called O Disbelievers. The final line of that verse in the Quran is, to you is your faith and to me is mine. Are you aware of that chapter in the Quran, and are you aware of the teachings of tolerance the Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah have taught us for centuries?
Allah, thank you. I'm just going to explain to you. One of the reasons why I didn't want to start quoting Quran verses was because I didn't want to come here and start talking about, it says here that you chop people's heads off, it says here that you do that, and it says here that you do that. I'm sure that there are very, very, very many verses in the Quran that talk about peace and love and happiness. It's just all we get is the bombs, the running over, the knives and the beheadings. So I'll move on if that's all right. Thank you very much. I'm done. Move on. Thank you very much. So I've said, notably, peaceful coexistence with non-Muslims is not an opportunity offered. A position which can reasonably be held to say that it creates not just suspicion, but tension within a Western, secular, liberal, Christian goldfish bowl that Tom Holland tells us we all live in, right? That's where we live. We do. No one knows anything anymore. Everyone's feelings matter. So one thing is certain and is backed up by all the data. Muslims living in the West are pretty suspicious of us. So I'm not going to talk about why the West should be suspicious of Islam. Let's talk about how suspicious Islam is of the West. The Policy Exchange report, titled Unsettled Belonging, published in 2016, which claims to be the most extensive research of British Muslims ever conducted, revealed that, let's do it, 43% of British Muslims supported the introduction of Sharia, not British law, Islamic law. 53% prefer to send their children to school with strong Muslim values, suspicious perhaps of Western ones. Maybe, I don't know. 44% that schools should be able to insist on face coverings. Does this sound like a community which seeks integration? Do we have a right to be suspicious of those who reject our values and the societal norms of their host country? 24% sympathise with violence organised by groups to protect their religion. That's what the Muslims say. And 31% thought it was acceptable to keep more than one wife, illegal in Britain, but fine in Sharia apparently. And 35% believe that the Jews have too much power in the UK, 52% compulsory halal. I could go on and on and on and on. But most important to me is the free speech of this. So let's get this out, shall we? 78% of British Muslims believe that no publication should publish pictures of Muhammad. An overwhelming majority. That rises to 87%. That's 9 out of every 10 Muslims that are walking the streets today in a country which absolutely abandoned blasphemy laws. Suspicion is not strong enough a word. The West should resist Islam in the strongest terms on free speech grounds alone. So here we are with this cartoon, right? And it's time to show that I will not submit. I will not adhere to the religious laws of far-off places. Now, my wife asked me not to show this for fear of repercussions in my family, but I told her that if I did not, then I had already submitted to Islam. So here we are.
Is it not enough that half the team that invited you to this debate were Muslim women who wanted to hear out your expression and your arguments? Is it not enough that I, as a Muslim president, have invited you to this chamber to give your arguments? Is that not enough justification and evidence for you to believe that we do believe in free speech? I would not become the president of a free speech society if not for it.
Thank you, Allah. Allah, may I? Thank you very much. May I finish? Excuse me.
Point of order having been raised, I will hear the ex-librarian.
It's a long time since I've been in this chamber and knew the rules off by heart, but in the House of Commons, and we model ourselves on the House of Commons, props are not allowed. I wonder whether the rule on props is the same in the Oxford Union.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order.
Excuse me, for 1 second.
One moment.
In the
One
absence...
moment. Mr. Fox,
in the
one
absence-
moment. One moment, Mr. Fox. The ex-president is also raising a point of order, I think.
Just so it's helpful to inform the ex-librarian and others, at least my 40 years old society, that ban was not extended and didn't seem to apply to Israel and Palestine flag.
Thank you. So, right, I just want to wrap this up.
I am going to rule on the point of order. There is no bar in the forms of the House against the use of props. However, I would encourage Mr. Fox to make the point and move on.
I was until points of order. So it is in that spirit that I will not submit that I show you this as an Englishman who believes in free speech. I will not submit. I will not bow down. Right. So, I think which rather proves the point I was trying to make, that in this envelope lived your fear, and your fear of Islam and what Islam will do to you that when you upset its very oversensitive sky wizard. And what lived in this room is a healthy and brilliant and noble British tradition of suspicion of Islam. I encourage you to pass the motion. Thank you very much.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that speech advancing the proposition, and indeed for his... we probably have some pens if you want it signed. We can arrange that later on.
It's Hamog.
And I now call upon the President to continue the case for the opposition.
Right. There is anger in this room tonight. There is anger in homes and on streets and throughout communities that no longer feel safe and no longer feel like they matter. Anger from people who feel that no government in any party in a generation has told them the truth about why their lives are the way that they are, why their rent is unpayable, why they cannot get a GP appointment, why the country they knew is not the country their children are inheriting. I'm not going to stand here tonight and tell you your anger is wrong. I'm not going to dismiss you as a racist for asking honest questions about a country that has stopped working for you. And that is why I wanted this debate to be held, because we have seen what happens when people's anger goes unaddressed. It does not disappear. It looks for somewhere to go. And there are people in this country, people on that side of the argument, who have made it their business to be standing there when that anger arrives, ready to point it in a direction that serves them and, believe me, hurts you. The proposition does not have a monopoly on that anger. Mr. Robinson and Mr. Fox have built careers directing that anger at easier targets, scapegoating Islam and Muslim communities, not because we are the cause of your suffering, not because we are a direction of your suspicion, but because when you are profiting from a hollowed out country, it is safer to scapegoat a minority, to set its citizens against one another, than it ever would be to finally let them ask who hollowed their country out in the first place. But first, let me do what I believe side proposition has missed the mark on when this discussion is being held. Let me reiterate what this motion is and what it is not. The motion is not, the West is right to be suspicious of Salman Abedi, the Manchester Arena bomber. The motion is not, the West is right to be suspicious of jihadist ideologies, of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, of the examples that you've presented. I, as a Muslim, and I am certain, and I can assure you, as many, the vast majority of Muslims are equally as suspicious of those people, of those organizations, as anyone in this room. Let me get to my introduction. Let me get to the motion. The motion is the suspicion of Islam itself, not some caricature that has been painted by Lawrence or by Tommy, or from selected verses in the scripture without context, without understanding, without reference to any of the verses that preceded it or came after it. It is not selective understanding by people who do not believe in Islam. The people who behead, the people who wage wars, the people who attack, and the people who stone and behead, these are not
followers of Islam. The motion is about Islam. The motion is about the body of the teaching, the 1,400-year tradition, the faith carried by 1.9 billion people, almost all of whom could not have been further removed in their faith, in my faith, from the abhorrent crimes committed supposedly in their name. And this is the important bit that I think you all miss.
Point of information.
Yes.
So people who killed the Coptic Christians, people who killed for ISIS, were they not part of that 1.9 billion? Were they just not part of that?
They were not following the teachings of Islam, and I will get to exactly why. They were not following the teachings of Islam, and I will get to why. I will get to why. The motion is about Islam, not about people who claim to believe in Islam and then misrepresent and denigrate our religion. The motion is that the body of teaching itself is the cause of those atrocities in a way that Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, and even secular ideologies are not the causes of their own. That our faith is inherently incompatible with and in fact are a danger to British society, its values, its traditions, and its culture. That every Muslim therefore warrants a presumption of suspicion, and I'm going to, point by point, take your arguments at their highest and tell you why they are wrong. First, given that there were arguments presented by Lawrence, I'm not too sure where he's gone, Lawrence and Tommy, there you are, Lawrence and Tommy about presumed and supposed scriptures and points in the Quran and verses, I want to take you through what they actually say, what the teachings actually say, what Islam actually says, not the caricature you've been painting. And then, I'd like to ask you whether you are suspicious of those values and those cultures. The claim that the Quran is a manual of violence and that mainstream Islam is therefore inherently at war with and in contradiction with Western values is what I've heard tonight. You will have heard, for example, both from JL and Tommy Robinson, that the proposition calls the sword verse, kill the unbelievers wherever you find them. What you will not have heard is the verse immediately before it, which exempts anyone who has kept a peace treaty with the Muslims. You would not have heard the verse immediately after it, which orders Muslims to grant safe passage to any non-Muslim who asks for it and to escort them to safety. You will not have heard that every major classical commentator on the Quran across 1400 years and every Muslim that actually follows the scripture agrees that the verse was about a very specific group of Arab tribes who had signed a peace agreement with the early Muslim community and then broke it in the middle of war in 17th century Arabia. It is dishonest. It is dishonest to stand here, no, let me finish. It is dishonest to stand here and selectively quote and misrepresent and misquote. Let me get to the end of my point and I'll get to you. Let me get to the end of my quote and then I'll get to you. Let me get to the end of my point and then I'll get to you.
Point of information has been declined, Mr. Jones-Lyons.
It is not and has never been read by the scholarly tradition as a standing order for all Muslims in all centuries against everyone who does not share their faith. It has never been the case. And anyone who says that they follow Islam and have committed those crimes in that name, in that verse, is a liar and not a follower of our religion.
That verse, after beheading the handed woman verses, one of them was that verse, justified when he murdered. So again, don't need to argue with us. You need to argue with the people.
I get your point. I have just given you the exact quotation from the religious scripture upon which that person claimed to have followed. I have shown you that that is not what the verse says. Let me finish, Jail. I have shown you that that is not what the verse said. I have shown you that that is not what the teachings ascribe to us and tell us to follow. Let me finish. If somebody wants to pick out any verse from the Bible, from the Old Testament, from the Torah, any selective verse, a verse where Moses is discussed killing innocent civilians or Solomon taking up tens of dozens of wives. And then I tell you that that must justify anyone who then claims that that text is referenced to or is presented to be a defense of their actions. You would tell me that is unjustified. You would tell me that is not the correct reading of the scripture.
Can I...
I've accepted a point of information.
Gentlemen, can I ask you both to take your seats, please? Mr. Andalusi. Thank you.
I've accepted a point of information.
Well, can I encourage you to make a little progress, since we seem to have points on both sides, and then perhaps return to the point?
Yeah. Let me finish, please.
No, point of order having been raised. Mr. Jones-Lyons.
Can I raise the point?
You did raise the point.
I asked that people be forbidden, as the Reforms House forbid, from doing individual photography and filming.
You will not have heard that
Madam President, one moment. I will remind those in the chamber that with the exception of those with prior arrangements with the Society and the Society's own videographers and photographers, there is to be no recording in the chamber. There will be one warning given, and on the second warning, people will be removed.
This
The only
motion-
exceptions are the society's videographers and those that have already arranged recording. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. This motion is not about non-believers, people who say they believe in Islam but don't actually follow its teachings. It is about Islam. And I would urge you all to follow through with that motion, with that wording, and actually scrutinize the religious teachings for what they actually are and not for what you want them to be to fit your narrative. Let me get to my point. Thank you. You will not have even heard that the verses that you are quoting come from a chapter in the Quran called repentance. Not conquest, not war, repentance. That it is the name the book itself gives to the chapter the proposition will tell you is a manual for killing you. Another claim we have heard tonight from Tommy Robinson is this: whoever changes his religion, kill him, from Bukhari. That sounds absolute, but it is not. The Hanafi school, followed by most British Muslims, in fact most Muslims across the world, has long held that this only applies to those who leave Islam and wage war against communities. Wage war. It is not just, it is not honest, it is not just, and it is not honest to cherry pick quotes and verses. I will get to you. Let me get some progress, please. Let me get to make some progress, please. And then when it comes to the verse supposedly enabling violence against women, actually, I'll leave that for, you haven't mentioned it, so I won't bring it up. But if somebody were to mention the verse on that supposedly enables violence against women, all that verse is hung on is one word in Arabic, which commentators like yourselves have latched on to mean beat them. That word has 20 different meanings in Arabic. Major scholars do not interpret that word to mean the worst and harshest possible interpretation. The Prophet himself, whom you say we believe is rightful and we must follow in his example, said himself that he disliked men who hit their wives. So just preempting any arguments that were put in that direction. Let me please finish, Jael. The same pattern shows up with the hadith you mentioned about Aisha and the marriage. The claim that she was 6 at marriage and 9 at consummation. Except what they don't tell you is that the source who provided that recollection is not seen as concretely reliable, that the author of one of the earliest and most revered collections of hadith in Islamic law, Imam Malik, did not accept this narrator's report, and that various reconstructions, including from the Yaqeen Institute, put her age as far, far older. English common law, however, set the age of consent at 12 until 1875. Canon law permitted marriage from puberty. The marriage practices Mr. Robinson is condemn the whole of pre-modern civilization, including Christian Europe, if we were to take his arguments at their highest tonight.
Point of information.
Let me get through my speech. I'm not being able to get
You haven't taken one point from me. Are you afraid? There are still Muslim countries in this world which say that their legal system is based on Sharia, which allow the marriage of children because of their belief in those verses. Are you saying they're not Muslims too?
Again, and I do not understand why it is so difficult for proposition to wrap their heads around this. People can take any text and they can misinterpret it and they can misapply it and they can believe that what they're doing is Islamic. Leighton, sit down. They can believe that what they are doing is Islamic and in accordance with Islamic principles. I am asking you to scrutinize Islam and its teachings. Let me get to its point. The people who misquote, misrepresent, and take Islam at its worst and then try and purport that they are Muslims and they are following the teachings of Islam are people you should be suspicious of, I have no doubt. But that is not suspicious of Islam.
We're talking about our nations.
Can I finish, please? We are also told Muslims are meant to follow the Prophet's example. Fair enough. But then key parts of that example quietly disappear in the arguments presented by Tommy and Lawrence and the rest of the bench. The Constitution of Medina, drafted and delivered by the Prophet, set up a community of Muslims, Jews, and pagans living together with mutual obligations and religious freedoms. Quote, the Jews are a community along with the believers, to the Jews their religion, to Muslims theirs. It is right there. It is right there. Another treaty was with the Christians of Yemen, protecting their churches and clergy, not mentioned anywhere. The Prophet's final sermon 2 months before he died went as such: there is no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, or a non-Arab over an Arab, or a white over a black over a white, except in piety. Not mentioned anywhere in any of the arguments that you are going to present, because it does not fit your narrative. I'm gonna run out of time, please bear with me. From the Quran's own lines in that chapter that I quoted to you, which is called, O disbelievers, for you your religion, and for me mine. Somehow that does not make the cut. After a while, the pattern becomes obvious. The case works best when certain texts stay off the page. You can do the exact same thing with other scriptures. Deuteronomy 20, when you take a city, save alive nothing that breathe. Numbers 31, kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has not. Let me finish. You can build a very dark picture that way, but that is not how Jews and Christians read their scriptures. I extend that generosity to my Christian brothers and my Jewish brothers and Jewish neighbors. I'm simply asking that it be extended tonight to mine. Can I please get through my speech? I will get back to you. So let's actually see, because you've said, how do people take that religion and that scripture and how do they apply it in their day-to-day lives? I'm not going to deny that there are people who try to understand that, fail, and try to use that as a cover-up for atrocious and abhorrent actions. Those are not Muslims, latent, for God's sake. So let's see how those religious teachings translate into actual Muslim attitudes. Opium, last year, 85% of British Muslims back democracy as the best system of government. The general public, 71%. 94% back equal treatment under the law for all faiths and none. The general public, 80%. 7 in 10 say they feel loyal to the United Kingdom. The general public, 1 in 2. 8 in 10 interact with non-Muslims at least weekly. 9 in 10 stay standing against bigotry, including anti-Semitism, matters to them. 4 in 10 have served themselves or through family in public service. On every single one of those measures, British Muslims are more committed to British values than the British average. These are not numbers from a community at war with this country. These are numbers from a community holding the line on the values this country claims to believe in. Well, the proposition tells you we are a threat to them. And exactly the same pattern shows up when we turn from opinion polls to crime statistics. The story you are being sold about Muslim crime looks very different once you see the whole pictures, including, for example, grooming gangs. And please do bear with me, I've been interrupted for quite a bit. For the grooming gangs, the abuse happened, the girls were real, the failures were real. I will not minimize any of it. And as a Muslim woman, I am not here to do so. In Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, the offender public's profiles on the headlines were dominated by British Pakistani Muslim men. That is true, that must be spoken about. But there is another truth that must be named alongside it. Those girls were working class. Working class girls in towns that had already been told their problems did not matter, failed by police officers who did not come, councils who looked away, institutions that decided their suffering was not worth the paperwork. Class contempt is what allowed this to continue for decades, and no girl, no working class girl, no girl of any background should ever have to learn that her pain is an administrative inconvenience. What Mr. Robinson never shows you, and what the rest of the bench will never talk to you about, is that 81% of child-based sexual offenses were most commonly committed by white men. The government's own 2020 review of group-based child sexual exploitation said 2 things very clearly. First, that group-based child sexual exploitation offenders, let me please land, are most commonly white. I'm getting to that point. And second, that the data are too poor to show that any ethnic group is uniquely predisposed to offending or overrepresented as perpetrators. That answers your point. I hope you heard it. In other words, there is no evidence that so-called grooming gangs involving Muslim men are disproportionate once you step back and look at the whole picture, rather than a handful of high-profile cases.
In groups of men.
I didn't take it. Please go ahead, but please stop the time. Go for it.
Groups of men rape children. Groups of men. So there's 2 different types of people here. There's individual like which you said was 81% white. The country's got 87% white, so they're not overrepresented. The point is, Pakistani men make.
Under a conservative, no, because you made your point, you've made your point, and I've heard it. You made your point, and I've heard it, and I asked. You made
Mr.
your point,
Robinson, can I ask you to take your seat again, please? Thank you.
Okay. A conservative government inquiry into, a conservative government inquiry into the proportion of grooming gang-related crimes committed by all groups, found.
Mr. Robinson, I must ask you to take your seat. The point has been taken. The President is responding.
Right. Please do check the facts after this. Everyone here in the chamber is more than welcome to do so. I'm asking for 2 more minutes, if you'll allow me that. There are some other facts that the proposition will not give you. The first, that Muslims were among the dead in terrorist attacks, supposedly committed under the name of Islam. Muslims were among the doctors who treated the wounded, the paramedics who ran towards the smoke, the first respondents who held the dying. The proposition asks you to condemn a community it will not acknowledge was also grieving. The second, that Muslims are disproportionately represented among those who flag concerns to counter-terror programs. It is Muslim mothers who call the hotline, Muslim fathers who sit with police officers and say that something is wrong. The community the proposition frames as the threat is in practice one of our most reliable lines of defense. And then there's what the proposition will not say at all. In 2019, a man walked into 2 mosques in Christchurch during Friday prayers and murdered 51 Muslims, among them a 3-year-old boy. His manifesto named Mr. Robinson directly. It thanked him. If we are tallying the dead tonight, and the proposition has made very clear that we are, then the dead of Christchurch belong on that tally too. He thanked you on the card. I haven't accepted more information.
Mr. Robinson, please, thank you.
Suspicion of Muslims as a category has also been tried as a policy. Over 83,000 men from 25 mainly Muslim majority countries were forced to register with US authorities under special registration. More than 13,000 were put into deportation proceedings. The number of terrorism convictions produced was 0. In the United Kingdom, between 2001 and 2011, fewer than 1% of terrorism-related arrests resulted in a conviction for a terrorism offense. It broke up thousands of families and consumed billions in resources, catching almost nothing. That is what suspicion of an entire community, of an entire category of people gets you. Nothing. I'm going to skip over to my ending. So when the proposition tells you that more suspicion makes Britain safer, I would like to ask them to look at the record. Not the theory, the record. And look too at who they are telling you to trust. And this is important, because these are the people who are advocating for these points most, and it is important to know where they come from. In 2018, Mr. Robinson published videos claiming that Jamal Hijazi, a Syrian refugee schoolboy in Huddersfield whose assault on a playground had gone viral, was himself a violent bully. In fact, the video showed him being throttled and waterboarded by other people. Please give me a minute. Mr. Hijazi sued for libel. Mr. Justice Nicklin found Mr. Robinson's allegations were fake and highly defamatory and ordered him to pay £100,000 in damages. He did not go to prison for telling the truth about Muslim grooming gangs. He went to prison for lying about a vulnerable refugee child. Let me finish. Each generation of British Muslims is more educated, more politically engaged, more invested in this country's future. There are serious issues within some Muslim communities, and some of the most courageous people fighting those battles are Muslim women, doing it quietly without a platform, without a hedge fund manager paying their legal fees. So let me end where I began, with my faith and with this country. The Prophet Muhammad hosted the Christians of Najran in his own mosque and invited them to pray there after debating them on a religion that they ultimately did not pick up. They did not convert to Islam. He guaranteed the Jews of Medina the protection of their religion and their descent. The book I believe to be the word of God says in plain Arabic, there is no compulsion in religion. For you, your religion, and for me, mine. That is the tradition that built me. That is the tradition that proposition is asking you to declare suspect. Free speech and debate is not something I do despite being a Muslim. It is something I do because of it. Hold on a second. So when I defend your right to read from my holy book in a voice dripping with contempt, when I sit through speeches calling my faith a danger and rise to them with evidence rather than writ, I'm not betraying my religion, I am practicing it. Half the team that built this debate are Muslim women. Do not let anyone sell you a false England, an England that was pure until the day your Muslim neighbor moved in. That England never existed. The real England is messier, it's kinder, it's more mixed. It is England where a Syrian schoolboy in a school playground deserves protection from lies, where 4 young people in Filton can oppose a weapons factory without being branded as terrorists, where a Muslim girl can walk to class without being treated as suspect. That England is still here. It is worth fighting for. So look at who is on which side of this argument tonight. Look at who is defending free speech and who is suing journalists. Look at who only a week ago was in his abode in Spain telling you that immigrants are the problem. And ask yourself the only question this motion has ever really cared about, not whether Islam is a danger to the West, but whether a handful of rich men get to convince you that your own neighbors are your enemy. Vote against this motion. My faith has survived empires. It will survive this evening. Vote against it to protect what is best in your own tradition, the right of every person in this country to be seen as a human being before they are seen as a category. They are not trying to fix this country. They are trying to own it. Do not let them own your anger or your England. We are not, and we never were, your enemy.
Millions of watchers at home. You made many accusations at the end about me there. 167 million people watched my documentary. They know what I reported. I'd say you probably not selling credibility because did you watch the film? Did you watch the documentary?
No, but I read about the legal proceedings.
Did you watch the documentary? I read about
Mr. Robinson.
I read about the legal proceedings. I read about the legal proceedings.
So you haven't seen the truth.
So you distrust the court.
You haven't seen the truth.
You distrust one of the institutions.
Mr. Robinson, Madam President.
You watched the film like 160.
Order. Thank you. Madam President, I think if I can ask you to take your seat. Mr. Robinson, I can ask you to take yours. And I call upon Mr. Jonathan Sacradotti to continue the case for the proposition.
Thank you. Well, it's very good to be back in the Oxford Union. I just want to take up a few points that we've heard from the other side, which is really their strongest argument appears to be that anybody that's done something bad in the name of Islam actually wasn't really Muslim or wasn't really carrying out the true scripture of Islam. And indeed, they are non-believers, but even those people, Islam has some pretty vile treatments in store for. So on that basis alone, for non-believers of Islam, I would query whether or not we should be suspicious of it. And I must say again, I must echo the thanks to the President for her hospitality in bringing us here tonight. I have admiration for her holding this debate. She was also a wonderful host at the dinner. Last time they sat me almost outside, but she had me on the high table. Indeed, she offered me some wine, but I thought that Allah had cursed wine, its drinker, its server, its seller, its buyer, its presser, and the one for whom it's pressed, the one who carries it, and the one to whom it is carried. So I hope that she still counts as a Muslim, given that her version of Islam is one that sounded much nicer than the one that many of us are familiar with. 5 minutes before Salman Abedi detonated his bomb, killing 22 people at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester Arena, he was spotted by Kyle Lawler, an 18-year-old security guard. And after the bombing, Kyle told the Inquiry, "I just had a bad feeling about him." Kyle had been suspicious, but he didn't act, he didn't raise the alarm. Why? Here's what he said. "I felt unsure about what to do." That's what he told the Inquiry. And being branded a racist, it made me hesitant. 22 people were killed. This is a lesson in ignoring suspicion, and it's one that the West needs to learn urgently. No, thank you. I've had phone calls this week from friends, family, colleagues. Some called to praise me for my courage, others to question my sanity for coming back here, and one or two who begged me not to speak with you tonight. Why? In what way does it take courage to come and speak at a student debating society? Why would it be foolish for my safety to debate at the invitation of a Muslim woman with 2 Muslim men and a mock Victorian Catholic knight? We all know why.
Which bit is mock?
Well, the Victorian. We all know why. It's why there's quite a lot of security here. It's why there's a bit of electricity in the air. It's why this debate generated news coverage before it even happened. It is because of Islam. Now, I'm not a Muslim. For the purposes of full disclosure, I'm a Jew and a Briton. So I'm not here to speak for Muslims and what individual Muslims do or don't think or feel or believe. I'm not here to argue over Quranic verses and hadith. I'm here tonight to represent the other side of this debate, Western values. I'm here to talk about how Islam has encroached on our lives. I would love not to be here, especially at this time. I would love never to talk about this topic again, never to talk about Islam. It's not my faith, it's not my ideology. But over and over again, it has confronted me, coming for my life, for your lives. I am not motivated by hate, whatever those people outside say. The only person in this debate who has made physical threats was over there. No, thank you. I am motivated by love. Love for freedom, love for life, love for debate, for discussion, love for the West. The West is a civilization of defiant liberty and fearless truth-telling, and that is why I'm here now. Now, I often ask people what their first conscious memory of Islam was. For me, it was as a child of 8 or 9 when Salman Rushdie published the Satanic Verses. What followed was a global eruption of Islamic fury. Book burnings in the streets, a death fatwa from Ayatollah Khomeini, and a trail of terror that crossed decades and borders. My own father, a bookseller who believed in the fundamental Western right to read and write even offensive ideas, was forced to sell copies from behind the counter for fear of his own life. Translators were stabbed, publishers shot. And over 30 years later, in 2022, a young Muslim assassin, Hadi Matar, nearly murdered the elderly Rushdie on stage in New York, blinding him in one eye, because he wrote a story. Yet, in the face of this medieval intolerance, Rushdie struck back with the West's greatest weapons, his pen and his mind, writing a new book, Knife. He fought violence with art, Western. They fought art with violence, Islamic. But you don't need to be a writer to have suffered the violent intrusion of Islam into your life. On September the 11th, 2001, 19 hijackers cried Allahu Akbar as they murdered nearly 3,000 people in the name of Islam, flying planes into the Twin Towers. On the 7th of July 2005, 4 British Muslim suicide bombers slaughtered 52 commuters on London's tube and a bus, declaring, "We are at war and I am a soldier." In 2013, Michael Adebilajo beheaded the young British soldier Lee Rigby in broad daylight on a Woolwich street, and then proudly told police and cameras, his hands dripping in blood, "I'm a soldier of Allah." Theo van Gogh, stabbed, shot, nearly decapitated in Amsterdam for criticizing Islam. His killer pinned a note to the body declaring it was done, quotes, "by the law that commands me to cut off the head of anyone who insults Allah and his prophet."
Can you give me examples from the scripture, directly, in context, properly, that would advise or point to the actions of any of these specific people?
This is the crux of this point. I don't need to give you those examples because all of these men who slaughtered Westerners, who slaughtered other Muslims, gave their quotes from your holy book. Ayan Hirsi Ali, no thank you, who worked with Van Gogh, she's lived with round-the-clock protection ever since. She was a Muslim who committed the crime of leaving that faith and criticizing it. Are you starting to see the pattern yet? In 2006, Ilan Halimi, a French Jew, was kidnapped, tortured for 24 days and burnt alive by a gang who shouted, guess what? Allahu Akbar. A rabbi and 3 small Jewish children gunned down at a school in Toulouse. A kosher supermarket in Paris, 4 Jews executed. A teacher at Batley Grammar School here, hounded into hiding by Muslim mobs baying for his death for showing a cartoon. Charlie Hebdo, 3 gay friends in Reading, David Amos MP, Streatham, London Bridge, Westminster Bridge, Parsons Green, Manchester Victoria Station, journalists, gay men, Jews, MPs, commuters, police, ordinary citizens. The list goes on and on. Dishonest people will tell you that this is not Islam, but extremism. Extreme what? Extreme Jainism, extreme Quakerism. The 2 converts to Islam opposite cannot deny that those killers were Muslim, following their Islamic beliefs. They said it themselves. The list of Islamic contributions to our Western life demonstrates that human cost, the human cost that makes people in here afraid to even talk about Islam. That's why we're suspicious of Islam. And don't worry, I know that Islam is not all violence. It's also political. In 1928, Hassan al-Banna founded the Muslim Brotherhood, a disciplined movement to reverse the fading of traditional Islamic life in Egypt, building an entire alternative Islamic society. I have another couple of pages, which I hope you'll give me the courtesy of. Building an entire Islamic society, mosques, schools, charities, youth groups, businesses, institutions, which they then spread to the West. And their devised strategy was one of patient Islamic transformation from within. A civilizational jihad. Don't worry, that is not a far-right name made up by Tommy Robinson or me. That's actually what they called it, and we know that because the FBI seized their 1991 explanatory memorandum setting out the plan to settle in the West, build Islamic centers and bases, infiltrate institutions, and work until, quote, Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. No, thank you. Nearly a century later, they are widely accepted across Europe and in the US and much of the West as a dangerous threat to democracy. So Islam doesn't only attack with bombs. Sometimes it uses our own freedoms and our own land and our own institutions against us. And Islam's ambition to spread is not always so subtle. Historically, Islam is an ideology of conquest and expansionism. After Muhammad's death in 632, its armies burst out of Arabia and within a century conquered much of the ancient Christian world, the Middle East, North Africa, Egypt, Syria. They pushed into Spain, Al-Andalusi, where's that name from? They reached France, halted at Tours in 732.
The honourable gentleman give way.
Yes.
Reminded what happened in 1492.
Thank you for the reminder.
Forgotten it that the Muslims were expelled along with the Jews from Spain by Christians.
They were indeed.
These sorts of wrongs have happened between all religions throughout history.
And 14th century, excuse me, absolutely. And if you would like to invite me back, Sir Rees-Mogg, I would be delighted to debate your religion and your faith and the wrongs that it has done my people as well. But that is for another evening. Wherever they've conquered, Jews and Christians were reduced to dhimmis, defeated peoples living under submission, tax, and Islamic supremacy. Because at Islam's core is political, theological dominance, not private, internal faith. They may try to hide it, but it is written in blood across the centuries until today. For every other ideology, we can be proud of the positives and still suspicious of the negatives. But some people are so quick to list all the great things they say Islam's contributed. The second speaker, that he gave some money once to an old man who was in need. But they utterly reject any Islamic connection to all the dreadful things that I've mentioned tonight. The bits they like, those are all Islam. But the bits they don't like, well, not Islam. Totally binary. In an era when being non-binary is all the rage. Everything today is on a spectrum, except Islam. So, I'm asking you to believe your own eyes, to accept your own survival instincts, apply the same rational thoughts to Islam that you would and should to any other set of ideas and behaviours. Kyle Lawler, that Manchester Arena security guard, will live forever with the heavy weight of ignoring his suspicion. Don't be Kyle Lawler. Don't be afraid to call out an urgent danger that you instinctively identify just because you're afraid. What we have in the West is worth protecting. Our freedoms, our culture, our ethics, this university, this country, all of it. And it can compete, it can win, but only if you stay curious, stay intelligent, stay suspicious, especially of Islam.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his speech advancing the proposition, and I call upon Abdullah Andalusi to advance the case for the opposition.
Thank you. Greetings to you all. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Pax Vobiscum to the Catholics. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President.
Not quite yet.
Yeah. Members of the Oxford Union, friends, I know you're tired after a long debate. I'll try to bring some clarity to a lot of these discussions. Unfortunately, as Brandolini's law states, it takes a disproportionate amount of time to explain something that is false, which was said in a few words. So I'll try to cover as much as possible. My background is Portuguese, so I might have unpatriotic thoughts when it comes to the World Cup. Força Portugal! But I will say that my background is actually more fascinating than this. From my mother's side of the family, I discovered that we descend from a Jewish family that was, a couple centuries ago, persuaded to be Catholic and wasn't able to escape Spain. And if they were trying to hide their faith, there was the Portuguese Inquisition around to give some very sharp arguments. Now, I know you're thinking, the Portuguese had an Inquisition? Yes. No one expects the Portuguese Inquisition. So, this title is a funny one, and I'm going to try to deal with as many points as possible. I think that if we looked at Hermann Ebbing, the German member of the Free Democratic Party, who argued when he was found with child photos that if he was prosecuted publicly, it would increase anti-Semitism, and his sentence was reduced. Tom Artyom Alexandrovich, again, someone caught in Las Vegas, left to Israel and very quietly allowed to escape bail. And of course, well, Jeffrey Epstein, Weinstein. If we said, wait a second, what do they all have in common? Should we start being suspicious of what they all have in common? You'd say that's anti-Semitic, and rightly so. So could we not extend, perhaps, the same latitude to criminals in every other community on planet Earth? Please.
None of those people used the Torah to justify sexual abuse, for example, or any of those things, because it's not in there. They did it because they're bad people,
you mean the
not
Mishnah,
because they're
perhaps?
Jews.
Some, actually, that there's been some quirky rabbis, not actually part of the mainstream, but have argued for permissibility to have sexual relations with a child over 3 years old. Would we say, oh, that means that all Jews are allowed to do that, and that's allowed for Jews? No, it's not. Right? So anyone can, as the saying goes by Shakespeare, the devil can quote scripture. Okay. Well, I'm going to go into. Patience, sir.
Gentlemen, can I remind you of the forms of the House, please?
I think I've made him a little irate. It's okay. Please, just, no, I'm trying to talk about the principle.
Can I ask you to please refrain from interrupting the speaker? We have discussed the forms of the House. If you wish to make a point of information, please rise and do so. Otherwise, please allow the speaker to continue. Thank you.
So, let's discuss as many things as possible, and I'm going to speed up a little bit. So, people talk about what ISIS did to Yazidis. Where were the Yazidis, by the way? Or in the Middle East? For how long? 1,400 years. And who were their neighbors for 1,400 years? Muslims. So did Muslims only after 1,400 years say, wait a second, those look a bit funny. Yazidis, let's persecute them and kill them. That's how ridiculous the argument is. You know, I find it a shame that people only realized, despite all the rhetoric that Iran wants to kill all Jews, that the only time we realized that Jews were actually in Iran was when Israel blew up a synagogue in Tehran. Tehran has 30 synagogues, by the way. 6,000 Jews live in Tehran. Other issues. Let's see if I can go even quicker. The Quran says very clearly there's no compulsion in religion. There's actually 4 mentions of the word compulsion in the Quran, and every single one, it's always not to compel. Every single one. There's not a verse that's not mentioned. One second. There's not a verse that's not mentioned often, which is, it said, if God so willed, he would have created the whole world following one religion. So if that's the case, who are you to compel when basically religion should be only for God, i.e. God decides who is guided and who is not. That's not a verse of the Quran, right? We're not allowed to compel anyone to become Muslim. But also, sure.
Why can't you buy a plane to Riyadh?
Well, you can if you probably say, I'm not sure about Riyadh, but in Pakistan, which is an Islamic republic, you can. Just say you're Christian and you get beer, right? That's the point, is that let's pick the worst country we can find out of 50 countries and judge all Muslims by it, when the vast majority clearly go against your argument. Oh yes, it was said, doesn't Islam say you must kill gays? people who are homosexual? No, it doesn't. Not in a single verse, not in a single hadith. Brother, please tell me, how many gays did the Prophet Muhammad kill then? Why are you silent now? Right? How many gays did he kill?
Does the Quran actually not preach death for people who engage in homosexual sexual acts?
The Quran doesn't say, the Quran actually doesn't talk about that. It talks about people who have sex outside of marriage. But the point is, let me correct you. So, look, I know you're getting anxious, but like, please let me finish my point, sir. You know, freedom of speech. So, let me.
You said your freedom of speech.
Sorry?
You keep saying.
Yeah, but you have to let me speak first, and then I can give way to you. I haven't even started speaking, sir. Okay. All right. I think you have to judge religion based on the teachings, on the text, because that's where the religion comes from. If we judged religion or any moral ideology or belief system by its adherents, we would basically condemn all morality and humanity at all, because there's always criminals, always someone that are self-centered, despite their high-minded claims. Also, the laws that do exist on some of the books in the Muslim world, unfortunately, were taken from somewhere. The idea of the homosexual was invented in the 19th century, as in the idea that you should classify people by sexuality, homosexuality, heterosexuality, and so on. Krafft von Ebing was the person. And then the Victorians developed an idea that you should be intolerant about these people. It was a mental disease. And then they imported it or exported it into the Muslim world, when we never had the concept of the heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual. Everyone was just people. Right? So, and then we're blamed for basically adopting an older version of the West. We have to update to West 2.0, and we're being blamed for still on West 1.0. I would argue we should be in West 0.0, but it's because in Islam, we didn't have such persecutions that the West encountered. Let me finish that, then I'll take it. I'll take it in a second.
Point of information.
All right, I'll take it in a second.
Are you
So I didn't accept it.
Sorry, gentlemen, he said he'll take one in a moment. Please allow him to continue. Thank you.
So basically, if the Muslim world doesn't accept the forcefully imposed ideas and concepts from the West, we're somehow being intolerant of the West. That's kind of how you've been sounding throughout this entire discussion today, actually. I think the second thing is Sharia can't be imposed on non-Muslims. The Quran says, regards those Jews and Christians, Jews coming to the Prophet Muhammad to seek his judgment, and then they didn't accept it. So what does the Quran say? If they don't accept it, then turn away from them. Say, you go judge by your own book. It says judge. The people of the book should judge by their own book. It's actually in the Quran. Okay, I'll take it one from you.
So, few points. There's more actions for bullshit. So, what?
Mr. Jones Lyons, please sit down. Thank you. Mr. Jones Lyons, please sit down. Thank you very much.
Okay, if I may continue. Look, you know, the thing is, one of the issues that as Muslims face is that we are constantly on trial for our own existence. Like, the stakes today is not an academic stake. The stakes are something much greater, because these people have proposed certain policies, such as, you know, religious tests and ethnic cleansing. Remigration. And this is the threat that is basically upon a religious minority in the West. We're constantly in judgment.
A point of order has been raised, Mr. Fox.
Who is advocating for ethnic cleansing?
Here.
At any point this evening. The whole point of having a decent debate is in good faith.
This is a point of order or a point of information?
Mr. Fox, I hear your point of order. I hear your point of order. Mr. Andalusi, could I ask you to clarify who has advocated for ethnic cleansing?
Britain First. Members I've encountered of the Restore
people
Party.
you're mentioning are not at this debate.
Some of the friends of these individuals, which I will bring.
Mr. Andalusi,
yep.
I must ask you to withdraw the remark as it relates to the opposition bench, simply because the people that you're citing are not at this debate. Are you able to say that any of the gentlemen opposite have made that comment?
So, that's fine. I retract. I'll say members of the far right. Members of the far right. For example, there was a case where a black person attended with the United Kingdom March. There was Britain First guy there. The guy was there to support it, and Britain First said it's good. We'll get rid of the bad migrants first, and we'll save the good ones for last, basically, if I remember. Anyway, well, there's a video on it online. You can see it's been doing the rounds. Okay. So, if Sharia can't be imposed on non-Muslims, what about the command? Is there a command, or the alleged command, to kill all non-Muslims wherever you find them, or anything like this? And this is wrong. And I will quote to you a classical medieval Islamic scholar, Ibn Taymiyyah. I quote Ibn Taymiyyah because Ibn Taymiyyah was actually been praised by ISIS, been praised by Al-Qaeda. He's looked up to for them, but let's see what he says. He's a medieval scholar, so he's not pandering to any liberal current day. So he says, the foundation is that the blood of Bani Adam, which is the tribe of Adam, it's all human beings, is sanctified and inviolable, and no one is killed except by a right. Killing due to disbelief in Islam is not something which the legislations have agreed upon at any one time of Sharia, such as killing the one who sits out of combat, for this is something that the legislators have and the intellect do not differ over. The blood of a non-Muslim during the time since early Islam was sanctified and inviolable, just like the original sanctity of the person from Bani Adam. So, as Allah prevented Muslims from killing such anyone who's a non-Muslim, considering a non-Muslim. This is a medieval classical scholar. It's pretty straightforward. But then the question arises, why then did Al-Qaeda exist? What did the killers of Lee Rigby say they were doing it for, right? So?
A point of order has been raised. I'll hear the gentleman.
Just as a question for clarification, has the remark on remigration has been withdrawn? Yes. I actually have a quote here from Tommy Robinson. I would have remigration. It's time for many Muslims to leave this country if they're not going to integrate or assimilate. It's time to go home.
Yeah.
I hear the honourable gentleman. I hear the honourable gentleman's point. Mr. Andalusi, I hear the honourable gentleman's point of order. However, we are concerned with the comments in this chamber.
Okay.
I believe you're reading a quote from outside this chamber.
Okay.
Is that the case?
Yes, but I would leave.
I'm going to ask everybody to take their seats. I've ruled on the point of order. I will remind the gentleman that a point of order is not for simply reading quotes from outside the chamber. It must be to raise a matter concerned with the debate that is going on. Thank you. Mr. Andalusi.
I haven't even started speaking yet, sir. No, I haven't accepted it because my time is limited now, right? And I'll leave it to the imagination of everyone who here will be on his list of Muslims he will remigrate. So, what about free speech?
Excuse me, you can't do this.
I can. It's called my time to speak, sir.
Can I ask Mr. Andalusi to make some progress, Mr. Fox? I understand the point you're raising. Mr. Andalusi, can I ask you to continue? And can I ask you, Mr. Fox, thank you. Mr. Andalusi, can I ask you not to repeat that remark? We have already dealt with this point.
No, I need more than that. Right, okay. What about free speech? We've heard a lot about free speech. Well, I'll just give you an example of medieval Islamic free speech. Perhaps that would give you the best example, because you might say maybe Muslims here in this day and age in many countries don't fully understand what Islam requires them to do, quote unquote, vis-a-vis people who attack the Prophet Muhammad or criticize him. Well, firstly, the example of the Prophet Muhammad was he had a neighbor who was a woman who hated him, hated his message, and every day he'd come out. When he'd come back, she'd throw rubbish on his head, and he didn't do anything to her. Except there was one day when he came back and the woman didn't throw rubbish in his head. And what did he do? He went to her door, knocked on it, she opened it, and she was shocked to see him there. And he said, "Are you okay? I noticed that you didn't throw rubbish on my head, so I was concerned about you." And she said, "No one in all of the town has come to see me because I'm ill, except you." And then she embraced Islam. She was amazed at the person's morals. This is the example that Muslims follow. And I'll give you an example from Islamic history, please. Let me just at least quote an example. So maybe you've heard of someone, a saint called Saint John of Damascus. Why is he called Saint John of Damascus? Well, firstly, let me talk about his book. So he published a book attacking Islam, quite vociferously calling the prophet a false prophet who wrote ridiculous compositions, randomly he accused him of committing adultery, and wrote how that Muslims are like beasts who are destined to hell. Where did he publish this book? He published this book under the Umayyad Caliphate, Syria, during Islamic times. And then he had a student, Theodorus Abukaris, who wrote 15 more books criticizing, 15 more books attacking Islam. And he was invited to the court of Caliph Marwan to have a debate with Muslim scholars in front of the Caliph. And at the end, by his own account, he was given gifts and a mantle for his good debating skills, even though he had not embraced Islam and he had kept on attacking. And what happened to him? The Muslim scholar Isa bin Sabih al-Murda published a book refuting him. And that was it. This is Islamic free speech. And I'll leave it with one final point, because my time has been heavily limited, unfortunately. Does everyone know the quote, "Live and let live"? You've heard of it? Does anyone know a famous person or an infamous person that said it? You don't know? Or you're not going to like what I say next. I'm going to give you someone that you won't be able to get out of your head. There was a guy that said it relatively recently. His name is Osama bin Laden. He said it, and you can check in the book by Dr. Bruce Lawrence, the composition of the statements by Osama bin Laden, when he said, and let me explain the context. All right, it's easy to scoff, but it's harder to actually investigate the nuances of reality. The issue is, yes. Osama bin Laden was asked in an Al Jazeera interview, why are you fighting the West? And also you have declared that non-combatants can be attacked. So he said that because the West kills our women and children, and I want to protect our women and children by making the West pay a price to feel our pain in the same way to stop them from bombing us. This is not an Islamic logic, by the way. And then the person asked him, but does not the Prophet Muhammad forbid the targeting of non-combatants? And you know what Osama bin Laden said? You're right, it is forbidden in the Quran and Sunnah. But then he says, but this prohibition, he believes, let me finish there, this prohibition, he believes, is not absolute. Because he says in the modern world, which is not an Islamic text or someone, he says, we should reciprocate how the enemy fights us. And then he claims that Islamic scholars have permitted this. I will finish it right now.
I must ask you to conclude.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Sacredotti.
One last quote.
Gentlemen, please. Thank you. Mr. Sacredotti, you raised a point of order. What is your point of order?
We'd all like him to carry on. It's really funny.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Sacredotti. That's not a point of order. Mr. Stiles, yes. What is your point of order?
Thank you. Let me...
Can the gentleman opposite confirm whether he condemns...
That is not a point of order, Mr. Stiles.
Mr. Osama bin Laden...
Mr. Stiles, sit down. That is not a point of order. Mr. Andalusi, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I do condemn Osama bin Laden, his methods, because, as the classical medieval Islamic scholar Ibn Qurtubi says, it is not permissible for us to retaliate in the same manner, even if the enemy kill our women and children and cause sorrow to befall us. It is not permissible for us to act likewise with the intention of making them feel grief and sorrow. Medieval Islamic scholars understood the rules of war. Osama bin Laden wants to change it to become part of the modern world, to imitate the West. And he cites Winston Churchill's bombing of Germany. He said they can bomb civilians, why can't we? In Islam, this is a rejected argument. We don't copy monstrous actions. We don't become the monsters who fight us. But I will give one last sentence and I will conclude.
I'm sorry, but I must ask you to conclude.
Sure.
I'm sorry, we have gone on rather longer.
I will. So when I said live and let live, what was I referring to his full phrase? He said, if the West stop attacking us, we'll stop attacking them. Live and let live. He did not say the Quran tells us to kill all non-Muslims and massacre them. He did not say it. So the issue is this. We talk a lot about what motivates terrorists. But at least quote them. Because Osama bin Laden never himself uses the argument that the Quran says to kill non-Muslims. So the only people that believe that Muslims can kill non-Muslims are those standing in proposition. Thank you.
I thank the honourable gentleman. For his speech in opposition to the motion. And I call upon Mr. Leighton Stiles to close the case for the proposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I must say, I'm not sure how I can top that. And I'm not referring to the duration. Yes.
So the album by Bin Laden, Live and Let Live, I hear it's great for side proposition.
He talks about live and let live, and then continues to quote Osama bin Laden on all kinds of different aspects. The question I was going to ask you, Mr. Chair, was whether he condemns him, because if he does, I'm not sure why he quoted him so very much. I suppose that's a question for the gentleman, and you never took many of mine, so I'm going to wait. Now, I must say, Mr. Chair, when I first accepted to speak in this debate, I assumed I would be the most right-wing individual in the chamber. However, looking at the speakers alongside me, I am pleased to report this is no longer the case. Instead, this debate has already achieved something I previously thought impossible. In fact, we've encouraged Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg and Mr. Tommy Robinson to finally disagree on something. If anything, Mr. Chair, at least the Oxford Union still performs miracles. But that observation points to something quite important. The easiest mistake this House could make would be to assume that our argument belongs to one political tribe. That is not true. The argument I make tonight is not necessarily a conservative one, believe it or not. It is actually a liberal one. So, yes, Mr. Chair, I rise to propose the motion that the West does, in fact, have the right to be suspicious of Islam and Mr. Osama bin Laden. Hear, hear. Before anybody rushes to outrage, however, let us be absolutely clear about what we are and what we are not arguing. We are not arguing that Muslims are lesser citizens. We are not arguing that Muslims deserve fewer rights. We are not arguing that Muslims deserve less dignity, less freedom than anybody else. Indeed, one of the defining achievements of Western liberal democracy is the principle that, as Martin Luther King said, and I'm sure you're a fan of him, sir, as well as Osama bin Laden, is that individuals...
Point of order.
Point of order has been raised. Mr. Andalusi.
He said I'm a fan of Osama bin Laden, and in no way did I ever say that at all.
I hear the point of order. Mr. Stiles.
Actually, what I said, I'm sure he's a fan of him as well as Osama bin Laden.
Which does suggest that you think he's a fan of Osama bin Laden. I'm no English language graduate, but I think that's...
I'm willing to retract.
Mr. Stiles, can I invite you to withdraw the accusation that he is a fan of Osama bin Laden?
Of course, Mr. Chair. I'm
you.
willing to withdraw, but I will leave that judgment to the audience. Indeed, one of the defining achievements of Western liberal democracy is the principle, as I said, as Martin Luther King said, that individuals are judged based on the content of their character, not their religion and not their race. The Muslim citizen deserves the same rights as the Christian, the Jew, and the atheist who lives alongside them. What we are arguing is something much more simple, that ideas have no right to immunity from scrutiny. Religions have no right to exemption from criticism. Ideologies have no right to deference. The West has long been suspicious of numerous forms of ideas: monarchism, fascism, communism, Islamism, to name a few. And if we have the right to be suspicious of every other major belief, why should Islam be uniquely exempt? One may criticize the authority of the pontiff, the Pope. One may criticize the authority of the Quran. There is no double standard, of course.
On that basis, when someone criticizes home, when someone criticises Catholic teachings, is it a threat against the dignity of Catholics?
No, of course not. No.
Point of information.
Of course.
But are we not? We're not arguing about whether you have a right to be suspicious of Islam, but whether you are right to be suspicious of Islam. There's a difference. I'm sure you agree.
The motion is we have a right to be. So the West is right to be suspicious of Islam. That's absolutely fine. I think we're right to be suspicious of all sorts of ideologies, including, as I mentioned, of Christianity, of monarchism, communism, fascism, which we have been historically. You know, we're also right to be skeptical of Islamism, which Osama bin Laden seems to be a big fan of. Now, the opposition, Mr. Chair, have attempted to blur the distinction between criticism of Islam and prejudice against Muslims. But these are not the same thing. Suspicion of an idea is not hatred of a person. To question a doctrine is not to persecute its followers. Of course, I give way.
So you invoked Martin Luther King. If we accept Dr. King's principle that people should be judged on the content of their character, why should we judge nearly 2 billion Muslims by the actions of the French minority?
I'll refer the lady opposite to my most previous sentence, quote, "But these are not the same thing. Suspicion of an idea is not hatred of a person. To question a doctrine is not to persecute its followers." Our suspicion is particularly justified in Islam. Unlike many modern interpretations of religion, it is not always presented merely as a private spiritual faith. Many interpretations of Islam contain legal, political, and social prescriptions. They make claims about not only how individuals should live their lives, but how society should be organized and governed. When any belief system seeks influence over law, education, public morality, or political institutions, citizens don't only have a right, but a responsibility to question those ideologies. In addition to concerns regarding fundamentalist Islam abroad, for example in Iran and Afghanistan, we have witnessed, Mr. Chair, within our own society, serious challenges posed by Islamist extremism. The United Kingdom has spent decades confronting terrorist threats inspired by extreme interpretations of Islam. I direct all members to take a look at the MI5 terror watch list, made up overwhelmingly of Islamist terrorists.
PY, is the speaker aware that Islamism is not Islam?
Of course. There was no indication that Islamism is the same as Islam. The point I'm making is many followers of Islam take it to the extreme, disproportionately compared to other religions. Of course.
Was the Prophet Muhammad in business, by definition?
Well, I'm sure you know more about that, Tommy, than I would. We have also seen instances in which public authorities were reluctant to investigate or discuss pattern. No, I did not give you permission. Please sit down. We have also seen instances in which public authorities were reluctant to investigate or discuss patterns that emerged in certain criminal networks for fear of causing offence or appearing prejudiced. Whatever conclusions one draws from those cases, Mr. Chair, the lesson is clear. Fear of criticising ideas, cultures or communities cannot be permitted in the pursuit of truth. A liberal society must be willing to examine uncomfortable facts wherever they may lead. Of course, Mr. Chair, I'm talking about the rape gangs, one of the greatest domestic atrocities in decades. Thousands and thousands of young, white, working-class girls raped and abused. Yet the authorities, they were afraid to ask the difficult questions about the perpetrators, the vast and overwhelming majority of whom were Pakistani Muslim men.
Point of information.
I give way.
That's factually not correct. According to the VKPP National Analysis reports, only 2.2% of Pakistanis are involved, of the adults who are committing child sex exploitation Of the total amount of perpetrators, 2.2% are Pakistanis. How are they the majority? How are they the majority, sir?
That's fine. The rape gangs I'm referring to were mentioned in the J report, were mentioned in the rape gang report published yesterday by Rupert Lowe. You may be a fan of him, I'm not sure. Of course I give way.
On a point, across all child sexual offences in this country, around 88% of convicted offenders are white, and only a very small minority are from mixed or ethnic backgrounds. If we do not call that a white sex offender epidemic, why is the Speaker entitled to call a far smaller subset a Muslim one? The Home Office's own December 2020 review of group-based child sexual exploitation found that offenders are most commonly white. Will the Speaker tell the House he is equally suspicious wholesale of white men as a whole?
Thank you, Madam President. I was not referring to anybody's race. What I was referring to is the religion of Islam and how culturally it is proven very, very prominent in these rape gangs. No, thank you. I would direct the members of the House to the rape gang report published yesterday by the Member of Parliament for Great Yarmouth, particularly to page 18, where the most egregious testimonies of all begin, those of the survivors. To recognise this fact is not to condemn ordinary Muslims. Indeed, many of the victims of Islamist extremism around the world are themselves Muslim, but a particular ideology giving rise to movements that reject pluralism, individual liberty, democratic governance, and freedom of expression. Citizens must be able to ask questions about those ideas. Indeed, every scientific advance and every philosophical breakthrough begins with the willingness to ask difficult questions. A society that loses this ability and the right to be suspicious loses the capacity to think critically. Ultimately, Mr. Chair, this debate is not alone about Islam. It is about whether any set of ideas should be protected from scrutiny because criticism may offend, of course.
The debate is not actually about whether the West has a right to be suspicious of Islam. It is very specifically that the West is right.
And I've pointed to...
a bit of a distinction there. We're not saying you don't have a right.
Thank you, Madam President. I've pointed to many examples as to why we would be right to, for example, the rape gangs. So if the answer is yes, that we should allow these ideas to be sheltered from scrutiny, then liberal democracy has fallen face first. It has failed. If the answer is no, and we should question these ideas, then the motion must stand, and you all must vote in proposition. We ask for no special suspicion of Islam. We ask for no lesser rights for Muslims. We ask only for the equal application of a principle at the heart of Western civilization, that every idea, however ancient, however influential, however sacred, must be questioned and is right to be criticized. Islam is a powerful and influential set of ideas. Like with every other powerful set of ideas, it may be examined, criticized, and yes, regarded with suspicion. And if there is one thing everybody in this room can agree with, it is that being suspicious of propositions is entirely reasonable. After all, you've spent the last 10 minutes being suspicious of mine. So, of course.
So, the motion is actually, this House believes the West as a whole is right to be suspicious of Islam. You're referring to individual suspicions and individual lines of inquiry. What this motion is referring to, and what I hope...
I think we have the point, sir. Please allow the Speaker to respond.
Is it a systemic?
Sir, please allow the Speaker to respond. Thank you.
Well, there was about 4 questions in there. I'm not sure which one to respond to. I'll go with the second or the third, or maybe the fifth. I'm not sure. What I would say to you is, in America, they're very suspicious of Islam, and they've had a very successful immigration policy. Over here, we're increasingly, as a society, suspicious of Islam, for some of the reasons I've mentioned, including the rape gangs, including the MI5 terror watch list, made up overwhelmingly of Islamist terrorists. So I hope that answers one of your vast array of questions. Now, for those reasons, Mr. Chair, including the fact that most of this room have probably been very suspicious of my propositions for the last 10 minutes, and maybe rightly so, I am also suspicious of Islam. And for those reasons, Mr. Chair, I beg the House to vote in proposition. Thank you very much.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that speech closing the case for the proposition, and I call upon the ex-librarian Trinity, Sir Jacob, to close the case for the opposition.
Mr. Chairman, may I begin by adding my congratulations to the President for being incredibly steadfast and stalwart against extraordinary pressure and hostility from people who ought to have known better and should have supported her in defending free speech. And may I thank Mr. Robinson for accepting the invitation to come to an audience that he didn't necessarily expect to be favourable. Free speech requires both sides of the argument to be put. I also congratulate the member who just spoke from Christchurch for his elegant speech, which unfortunately elegantly spoke about a different motion. And that is often a problem with the Oxford Union Society, that when a motion says one thing and a speaker thinks something else, he tries and talks around the subject. No, we've heard quite a bit from you already, but we might come back to later. And I want to speak strictly to the motion. The West is right to be suspicious of Islam. And here, Mr. Chairman, I'm disappointed, because I thought I was coming up against the hard men of the right of British politics, the people who have a reputation for being tough and forthright and powerfully patriotic. And it turns out that they are wee, sleek-it, cowering, timorous beasties, because they have no confidence in the West, in their nation, in the religion that has made our nation fine and great and strong. Instead, they're sitting there in their homes at night, fretting that we're suddenly going to be converted to Islam. Well, I'm not. Let me be quite clear about this. Because I believe in the enormous strength of the West and of Western values. And one of those Western values is that we believe in freedom of religion. But we partly believe in that because freedom of religion, freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, of which freedom of religion must be a subset, has made us strong. We have, whisper it quietly in the West, benefited from Islam during our history. What about al-Khwarizmi, circa 820? Even a bit before my time, who gave us the advantage of numbers. It took us 300 years to get his numbering system into Latin, or even into English. But that has been the foundation of capitalism. Without the numbering system that has come to us from Islam, we would not have the strength of capitalism that has made us strong and rich and prosperous and successful. But what about the Laffer curve? Now, there may be some people here who like the Laffer curve. I love it. I love this idea that lower taxes are a jolly good thing. I want them to be a good deal lower. But Arthur Laffer himself recognizes the value of Ibn Khaldun, who wrote 600 years before Arthur Laffer in 1377, beginning to come into my time. I think I was probably at school by then, but hadn't come up to Oxford yet. 1377, 600 years. What did he say? It's rather wonderful how he put it. He said that when a sultan comes to the throne, he has low taxes and lots of income. And when he's old, he has high taxes and no income. That is a beautiful encapsulation of the Laffer curve. And it comes from an Islamic scholar. If only the West had the wisdom to be a little bit less suspicious of some things that come from Islam, we might have lower taxes and a stronger growing economy. And go on, I'll give way to you.
Could you maybe come up with something a little more current from an Islamic scholar like, say, Osama bin Laden or someone?
Well, I know the side opposite, a friendly obsession with Mr. bin Laden. I'm not a fan of his, let me make that absolutely clear. I think he's one of the most evil men to have come into the world in the last 100 years. To come into the world in the last 100 years. A fundamentally evil, bad man. But if we go through the history of evil and bad men, are they all Muslim? Or dare I say that there are some Christians who have committed great and evil acts? There are people of all faiths. There are particularly atheists who are very dangerous. Stalin was an atheist, one of the great killers. Mao was an atheist, one of the great killers. You can't blame Mao and Stalin on Islam. And those are the risks we should be worried about. We should be worried about China and about Russia, people who threaten our safety. One, a totalitarian atheist state, and one, probably an Orthodox state. The Orthodox Church's relationship with the Russian state is pretty close. But do I dismiss all orthodoxy? Or do I in fact want it to come into union with Rome? And what about other people who have been important? I'm going to make the comparison, and I know my honourable friend opposite doesn't like to have historical comparisons, but they matter. We learn from our history. But the Christians in 1204 sacked and pillaged and destroyed Constantinople. They stole things, they took things, some of them you can still see in Venice today. When in 1453, the 21-year-old Mehmet II took Constantinople, do you know what he did? He wrote down some of the great works of Western literature, scholarship, and philosophy so that they were preserved. He had ancient manuscripts copied for their preservation. These are documents that might otherwise have been lost to us and to Western civilization. So my starting point on this suspicion is we should of course not be suspicious, because there are times when freedom of religion, recognizing what other people can do, has benefited our way of life. And I am a great and unapologetic advocate for our way of life, because when you go back to Mehmet II and you roll on for the next 100 and 150 years, Constantinople was the greatest, the richest, the cleanest, the most civilized city in the world. We were a backwater in comparison. But how did we succeed? What made us work? What made us work is that we developed a constitutional system of which we should be immeasurably proud and which is so strong that we can afford to have 6% of the country being Muslims without worrying about it at all. They are welcome fellow citizens. They are not going to take us over because our constitution will not allow Sharia law to become the law of the land. A democratic Westminster Parliament will not vote for that. So fear not. And what goes on in Iran is not what is going to happen in Westminster. So all these things we've heard about terrible punishments that apply in Islamic countries is for the birds. That is not going to be applied in the United Kingdom or in the United States or across Europe. We're going to be able to keep our way of life, have confidence, have faith. Now, confidence and faith, I give way to the honourable gentleman. There is no legality of Sharia law in this country as law. And did you know this is one of our most ancient statutes that is still on the statute book? The 1267 Statute of Marlborough makes it illegal for justice to be given out in this land by any court other than the King's courts. It is still the law of the land. It is one of the shortest acts of Parliament. It is our law. It makes our law equal for everybody in this country. And anyone who has Sharia law applied to them may apply to the King's court to have it disapplied. I'll give way again.
Your government, you was in charge of Conservatives in 2018, done a study into the 100 Sharia tribunals in the UK. You put two Muslims as the head of it, 50% on the panel of Muslims, and we were advised we can't close them down. This is by your governments.
I know the point. I will happily answer this. They are tribunals, that's the point. They are not compulsory law. The Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church judges on marriages. It is allowed to. The Act Against Appeals was repealed in the 1960s. There are other churches and other places that have their own internal laws, but they do not overtake. I won't give way again. It's getting late. I think everyone's probably quite keen to go home. But we've outlasted the protesters, haven't we? Which is, I think, a very good thing to have done. Oh. I've been having a go at this lot for being wet wipes, but they're the serious wet wipes. Come on, I'll give it to it again.
45 women's institutions in the UK wrote to the government during that investigation believing they should be suspicious. 88 international organisations, many of them...
I admire the Women's Institute marvellously. I think it's a fantastic organisation, but I don't particularly need to take my political opinions from the Women's Institute. That a few institutes write to say they're suspicious of something is not holy writ. It has to be said. It's the question. I won't give way any further because I do need to allow people to go home and to bed, to sleep, perchance to dream. But I wish to... Or in some cases they may have other intentions, but I won't go into that. They may worry it's not allowed under some laws or another, and it's probably not allowed by Holy Mother Church either. So, anyway, I'm expecting everyone to behave very well. I want to stick to this constitutional point because we should be so proud of our Constitution. And what is it? It is democracy, it is the rights of property, it is the rule of law, it is freedom of speech. If you go back to my great hero, Sir John Fortescue, he set this out in the 15th century, saying why it works in this country, why we are prosperous, is because the king is under the law, not the law. And that's why, over hundreds of years, we have reached, and countries like us have reached this level of prosperity, which Constantinople failed to do, because in totalitarian, despotic regimes, what you make can be stolen. This isn't Islam, it was the way Constantinople was run, and if you look at the Islamic countries, most of them have very corrupt and bad governments. And that has led to serious problems for them. And the ones that have money are beginning to try and copy us. So the UAE and very slowly Saudi Arabia are trying to develop to be more like us. If I were in Saudi Arabia, I would be saying I'm very suspicious of Christian values because that's what they're beginning to have imposed on them. Why? Because our values work. Our values have led to prosperity and they support freedom of religion. But I'm going to upset all my friends who I've been supporting this evening at this point because fundamental to our values is, of course, our Lord and Saviour. The reason the West is strong is because of Christ. And because of the resurrection. And the resurrection is borne witness to in the Gospels. It is borne witness to by the deaths of the apostles who were martyred having seen the resurrection. And that underpins the values of our society. And as our Lord himself said to St. Peter, you are the rock on which I build my church, and the gates of hell shall never prevail. Nothing will prevail against our values because our values are underpinned by that underlying truth that is Christ. And that is why I object to this motion so strongly. I think it is misplaced. I think it's basically cowardly. I think it is weak. I think it accuses individuals of having a collective guilt, which is Marxism. And they're not the hard right at all over there. Desperate old pinkos, it turns out. But it comes fundamentally down to what our values are built on. And Mr. Chairman, I'm very glad you ruled in favour of objects. Because I have an object in my pocket. I have an object which is a cross. The cross, literally, on which our Lord and Saviour died, because inside there is a piece of the true cross. Christus vincet, Christus regnat, Christus imperat.